Good evening, and welcome to this August 28th meeting of the Bloomington Planning Commission. The Planning Commission advises the City Council on development proposals, development standards, long-range planning, and transportation issues. Some items before the Planning Commission are study items, where we will not be taking formal action, while other items before the Planning Commission we hold public hearings where we encourage the public to testify. All 6 items on our agenda this evening are study items, so we will not be holding any public hearings. On some items, the Planning Commission has final decision-making authority, while other items, the Planning Commission acts in an advisory capacity and the City Council will be making the final decision. We have all 7 volunteer residents as Planning Commissioners here this evening, so we do have a quorum. And I will begin by asking everyone in the chambers to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As noted, we have 6 items on our agenda, and of course we will begin with item number 1, which is a study item. The City of Bloomington is the applicant regarding public arts incentives programs, and Ms. Hestbech, you have the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Yes, let me get set up really quick. Okay, yeah, so item number 1 tonight is a study item for incentives for art and development. A little bit of background. So the Bloomington Citywide Creative Placemaking Plan was adopted in March of 2025. And one of the things that came out of that plan was to potentially see what types of updates to the zoning code we could do to encourage the integration of public arts on private property. And so staff is just looking for feedback on the proposed code changes, which I will go through. As far as the timeline goes, I'm presenting at the Creative Placemaking Commission on September 3rd, and then this item will ultimately end up being added as a miscellaneous issues, and miscellaneous issues will come back to the Planning Commission as a public hearing in October, and then go to Council for the public hearing in November. So there are 5 proposed code changes. Code change number 1 is to create a definition for art structure, which is on the screen. I won't read it all. There's currently no definition for art in the zoning code other than for murals. So adding a definition creates the foundation for the rest of the changes and being able to add incentives for art on private property. Code change number 2 is to allow art structures to encroach into required structure setbacks. Required setbacks vary between zoning districts, so staff is proposing picking a specific number so that the encroachment can be applied uniformly. Staff is proposing a required minimum 10-foot front and rear setback and minimum 5-foot side setback. Staff is proposing the decreased setback to ensure that the structures can be seen by the public from streets and sidewalks, things like that. And additionally, staff is proposing a 10-foot height maximum for art structures that are encroaching into these setbacks. Code change number 3 is to allow murals to act as a substitute to the requirements for windows in mixed-use districts. Current requirements in mixed-use districts are that buildings must consist of windows on the ground level of the facade between 2 and 10 feet. There are several existing exceptions for this, including embellishment of the facade or installation of display boxes. So staff is proposing to allow murals subject to review of size and scale. The 4th proposed code change is allowing art structures to act as a substitution for up to 25% of landscaping requirements. Existing exceptions for landscaping requirements include fee in lieu of planting, and there's a reduction available for mixed-use districts. So staff is proposing adding art structures to the list of exceptions, again with the review and approval of the issuing authority. The last proposed code change is to allow art structures in landscaping yards. So in addition to the permitted encroachments into required setbacks that I talked about in code change number 2, staff is proposing to clarify that art structures can be allowed in the required 20-foot landscaping yard. And some of the existing allowances include rain gardens, sidewalks, and bus shelters. Again, for this, staff is proposing that the art structures be less than 10 feet in height. So again, this is a study session, so there's no formal recommendation required. Staff is just requesting feedback on a few questions that I have before the item gets added to the miscellaneous issues project. I'm just going to go through these questions one by one, but feel free to let me know if you have other questions along the way. So the first question is related to the proposed code change number 2. Should art structures be allowed to encroach into required setbacks? This would probably be, again, depending on height, which kind of gets into the next question. So first, we're just asking, are you okay with art structures having different setbacks in the principal building?
Ms. Hestbech, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Has this been reviewed by traffic?
Chair Cookton, no, but this is purely on private property, so it wouldn't be going into the right-of-way. I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at, but it will only be like up to the setback of the private property line.
Thank you. What I'm really getting at is, if there's one thing I know that traffic engineers don't like, are immovable objects close to roads. And so certainly I'm sure we'll do our due diligence on that, but yeah, I would ask that we make sure we do so, so we don't run into any problems there.
Okay.
Sorry, excuse me,
Mr. Johnson.
Chair Cookton, I would note that Brian Hansen, Development Coordinator, did review some of the draft code amendments as well as the staff report. So there is some traffic awareness and review on the project.
Very good. Any comments or questions about item number 1? Commissioner White.
I had just a quick question. Not being an attorney, I'm curious about the definition in number 1 about what is non-commercially produced. When I think about art, I think of paying an artist to produce a piece. So to me, that's commercially produced. So I just want to understand what you mean by non-commercially produced in this context.
Yeah. Chairperson, Commissioner White. This is up to being edited too. I think non-commercially, when we think of that, I guess in the use of like signs or murals, it's like not having the company's like name like on a mural. But again, I don't think we're necessarily tied to this definition. So if someone sees an issue or doesn't understand that, I think we can change it too.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
No, thank you, and I appreciate that. That does clarify it for me, but I think probably working on the wording to be more specific about that would be helpful. Because I do agree that just making art another version of a sign is not the intent that you would want to have here. So thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Munster.
if I could just sort of piggyback on that comment, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because when I read non-commercially produced, I was thinking something that is mass produced. It's, a sculpture that you could just go online, order, and bolt down in the front of the building. So yeah, some clarity on that would be great.
Okay.
Chair again, if I may.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cookton and Commissioner Munster and White. That's the thinking is more aligned with the issue that you just raised. And we had the same issue with defining the mural. And that's probably a little bit on me. I could have provided more input on that, having been dealt with the murals, but it's something that's not mass produced. It is an original work of art, if that makes sense. But it is a difficult thing to define, as we found with murals.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. To kind of, first of all, love the Sky Mall Sasquatch statues, but I understand the need for original artwork on commercial properties. I just wanted to kind of reframe us back to this question. I am comfortable with the setback as long as traffic is comfortable with it. I was thinking the exact same thing, especially as it relates to pedestrians by roads as well, and vision corridors and things like that. Thank you.
Ms. Hestbech, what's most helpful for you to get answers to these questions? Would you like us to go down the line to be very clear with you, or is a discussion sufficient?
Yeah, I think some of them kind of going down the line is helpful. This one, I think discussion is fine, but I do have like one or two that are kind of yes or no that going down the line would be helpful. But we can certainly move on from this one.
Thank you. Speaking for myself, I am okay with this. Commissioner Abdi? I'm sorry. Commissioner Issa, we've talked about this. Yeah, but I think we're going to go down the line and just generally, if you have no opinion or an opinion one way or the other.
I think, I would concur with what you both said, that, as long as traffic is not impacted, then I would be supportive. I like art. Yeah.
Commissioner White?
Agreed, as long as it doesn't obstruct the view. Are we going to talk about the landscaping requirement under a separate question? Okay.
Commissioner Linay?
Yeah, I'm supportive of this.
Very well. Get that microphone on for the folks at home.
Yes, I'm supportive.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Munster.
Agreed, supportive. And I would just add on the traffic note to make sure that there is adequate distance, because we are talking about the private property side from driveways.
And Commissioner Summers.
I think that if the art is at a maximum of 10 feet, the setback makes sense. Are any of the pictures 10-foot pieces of art? They all look much larger than that. So that is where and I think...
Yeah, Chair, Commissioner Summers. So some of these pictures are from Bloomington and some are from St. Louis Park. We don't, from the pictures I saw, really have any existing structures under 10 feet that seemed applicable. So none of these pictures are under 10 feet, and they wouldn't be like this huge thing. It wouldn't be like in a permitted encroachment. Yeah. Got it.
Ms. Hestbech, is this discussion question including the 10-foot thing, or is that a following question?
The height?
Yeah.
It's kind of a following question.
It's coming up?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so here we are. Okay, so next, I just want to ask, should there be a height limit on art structures that are encroaching into the required setbacks? So there are a few different options in the bullet points. Should staff set a maximum height, like the 10 feet that I've been talking about? Should the requirement just be that it can't exceed the height of the building on the property? Or should we just let it follow the height map allowance?
Commissioner Linay.
Thank you, Chair. Question for you. I want to clarify, does this apply to all private property, including residential property?
Chair, Commissioner Linay, good question. That's also a question that we have.
Okay.
If we want to include like multifamily residences, like apartment buildings in this, and what that would look like.
And what about single-family residences? I grew up next to a house that had a very large installation in the front yard, so.
Yeah. We're not really thinking about that right now. So if we were to do residential, it would probably be strictly in multifamily
Okay.
residential.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Please.
Second question is, just to make sure I understand the first proposal on the 10 as written, the 10-foot height limit, that is if it's in the encroachment area, but if it's beyond the required setback, then there is no height requirement?
Chair, Commissioner Linay, then if it's beyond the required setback for the zoning district, then it would be up to the height map and what height limit requirements we have in that zoning district or that area.
Great, thank you.
I think I'll get us started with some discussion here. I'm not in favor of the 10-foot thing. And the thing I kept thinking about when I read this was that weird pencil thing in South Minneapolis that everybody loves. And I'm sure that's taller than 10 feet. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know. I don't much like limiting the potential of art. If it's art, then let's just let it go as it pleases for me. Anybody else? Commissioner Linay.
Chair, I would concur with that. I think that what I would like to see more is perhaps a height maximum that's tied to the direct height of the building. So for example, that it doesn't exceed the total height of the building, or if it does, that we set a maximum limit, i.e. you don't end up with a 70-foot sculpture for a property that's only, a building that's only 30 feet tall, something like that. So that's the only thing I would say. But other than that, I agree. 10 feet seems a little bit arbitrarily low.
Commissioner Cunningham?
I concur with my colleagues. I'm not in favor of limiting the height of art, even if it's close to your house and you hate it. Art's supposed to invoke emotion. Commissioner Linay makes a good point that having some language in there to make sure that any art installation is proportional to adjacent buildings might be a very good idea.
Anybody else? Commissioner Munster.
If I could just ask, where did the 10-foot proposal come from as opposed to 15 or 12 or some other number?
Chair, Commissioner Munster. That number came from some other items of permitted encroachments we have. I can't think of exactly what those are off the top of my head, but I think it just kind of came from comparing other things that we allow to not have the whole setback. And then, yeah, also anything over 7 feet requires a building permit. So I think also kind of requiring that potentially with the 10 feet.
Commissioner White?
Yeah, I guess I'm also inclined, I'm not a fan of the 10 feet. It seems a little, I get that it's in line with some of the other things that are permitted, but the other things aren't art. So I'm not as big a fan of it in this particular case. I do think that possibly just following the height map allowances would cover what we would want to protect the community from in terms of having something wildly out of scale with the surrounding neighborhood. I'm not always sure that even, not exceeding the height of the building or not, I'm not even sure I really would be comfortable going that far, but I do think that following the height map for the community is probably, feels like the safest, most consistent way to apply it.
Any other thoughts on height limits? Commissioner Summers.
When I think about creative placemaking and the ways that art can be in and of itself a huge draw for people to our communities to visit and spend money and eat and enjoy Bloomington, I haven't met a lot of 10-foot sculptures that I've been amazed by. Mm-hmm. That I've gone out of my way. And I think that the pencil is such a good example. I think that we definitely, I don't know what it looks like to say we don't want things that are overtaking our neighborhoods and what that looks like. But I do know that a lot of 10-foot or smaller sculptures are going to potentially be drowned out by everything else. So when we are talking a lot about housing density, I'm art density also matters. So if we're trying to be a place where artists can make cool stuff, 10 feet seems pretty small, but maybe an analysis of the structures we have that are really valued in Bloomington and what height those are, and lining more to that, or maybe 10 feet over that would be we already have structures like this. This is not, if we make a rule that would have impeded us having those beloved structures, I would be against that.
Any other thoughts? Commissioner Issa.
Thank you, Chair. I think art is in, like, the beholder. So, like, if it's 10 feet and, like, there's a 7 foot, well, after 7 feet, it goes through a permit regardless, I would be fine with it, me personally. So, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so the first question on here kind of gets to the point. If we feel comfortable having these on multifamily properties, or if they should only be allowed on non-residential properties. This, if you have a lot of thoughts on it, feel free to say, but this could probably be a yes or no.
Yes.
Just confirming that yes means we're okay with
Yes on multifamily for me.
yes on multifamily for me as well.
You can just go down the line here in a study item.
Wait, is it murals or, like, actual art, like, structures?
Actual art structures.
Oh, yeah, both, I guess, yeah.
Yes, for me as well.
An emphatic yes for me.
Yes.
I want to say yes, and I'm in my mind thinking about as properties change hands. I don't know if there's rules about whether or not a structure needs to be maintained. So that's where I'm like, are you creating a potential situation where someone is letting something go into disrepair? That is the only place where I'd be like, that complicates the multifamily. But for the most part, I'm like, yeah, art everywhere all the time.
Yeah. Chair, Commissioner Summers, I think in the mural section, don't we have something like requiring certain upkeep? Planning
Mr.
Manager
Johnson?
Johnson? Yeah.
Yeah, Chair Cookton, Emily, yes, we do. Ms. Hestbech, yes, we do have maintenance requirements for murals, and structures in the city of Bloomington are subject to the International Property Maintenance Code, although I doubt they have a lot of content geared towards sculptures and art structures. But we certainly can look into that. If maintenance is an important element of this, we certainly could include something in the ordinance language. One clarifier for me is the way that our encroachments into setbacks are broken down is actually in all zoning districts, non-residential or all residential districts. So it would be helpful feedback tonight to clarify if you feel like it should be restricted to multifamily properties only or all residential zoning districts.
Mr. Johnson, I always get a little confused when we say things like residential district. So, like I live across the street from a commercial property. So, am I in a residential district because my parcel is zoned residential, or what does that mean?
Thanks, Chair. No, your property is zoned mixed use, HXR. Not to get into the weeds of where you are, but residential zoning districts are where primarily it's just residential uses allowed. There are some institutional uses allowed in some, or government uses allowed in some of our residential districts, but I'm thinking R1 all the way up through RM 100 is effectively our residential districts. So it'd be just helpful feedback in terms of whether or not you think it's okay in low density residential environments in addition to higher density residential environments.
Does that, Commissioner Linay?
That actually gets to the exact reason why I was asking the the question on single family residential, because that was the dynamic in Minneapolis at one point. Was you could have structures in single family residences, but very few realtors knew that they had to deal with it on the sale transaction. So you started to have the original owner put it in, the new person bought it, they had no idea what they were getting into, and then it became this ongoing issue in the neighborhoods. So I do think it's an important thing. I don't necessarily have a strong opinion one way or the other, but I do think that if we make the decision that they're allowed in, I would say, single family or non-medium density residential areas, that there needs to be consideration of how that factors in when there is a transfer of ownership in particular. I think it's less of an issue in high density big apartment buildings and whatnot, where there's a lot of, where you have professional facility staffs and things like that.
Okay. Commissioner Issa.
Yeah, I thank you, Chair. I think it should be allowed in single-family residents because it's their private property. But as far as the upkeep, when it comes to like especially multifamily, at least, I feel like it would. My opinion, I guess, it was the problem. I think naturally they would want to upkeep it just because if it's like an attraction to the property, it's like almost like landscaping. You don't want to have messed up landscaping, or else it's gonna be hard to lease out your place. So that's, I feel like that may solve itself in that sense for the most part, but just my opinion. Thank you.
Commissioner Munster.
So I'm just curious how it would work today. So, okay, if I'm reading our code correctly, we have a 30-foot front yard setback for a residential house in R1. If today I wanted to put a sculpture in my front yard that exceeds 7 feet, let's say 10, can I?
Chair, Commissioner Munster, we don't have a definition for it. If it's a structure, again, it would have to meet required setbacks. I'll let Planning Manager Johnson take that.
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. Emily's correct. So it's a miscellaneous structure, and if it was over a certain height, it would have to meet principal building setbacks. So you'd be subject to that 30-foot front yard, 30-foot rear yard, 10-foot side yard setback. And that's kind of the whole point around developing a special setback is that, something that far away is not going to be highly visible to the public right away or for the enjoyment by the public, or kind of have not as much impact from a vibrancy or placemaking standpoint. So that was one of the things that kind of informed looking at the reduced setbacks.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on the first question? Seeing none.
Cool, thank you. Again, this could probably be a yes or no unless you have strong opinions about it. Should murals be allowed to act as an exception to window requirements in mixed-use districts?
Ms. Hestbech, I have a question. Do we or could we require murals to be lit at night?
Chair, okay.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah.
Chair Cookton, we do not. No,
Not currently?
we do not currently. No.
Could we?
You certainly, depending on the context, it might make sense to do that. You're saying if it was utilized, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's a future question. The Windows transparency issue. Oh, you're already up there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You certainly could, if it was to take the place of required transparency, you certainly could require it to be lit.
Okay. My opinion on this, I think, is a bit nuanced. In general, I'm in favor of this. I would like it to be lit at night. That's kind of part of this is having, an attractive evening environment. I don't know if I'm in favor of allowing it universally, like maybe 50% of the transparency you were supposed to provide could be swapped out for a mural, but I'm not sure I can get there for 100%. Part of the reason we have that requirement is it's just like a public safety type thing, and it makes it more walkable when you feel like other people are seeing you. So I don't know if I could get there at a full 100%. Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. My note was I'm okay with it to 1%, and clearly defining what that is, just to make sure that we're not getting concrete boxes that are very beautiful murals on the outside, but no other dimensionality to the facade. Thanks.
Commissioner White.
Yeah, I would concur. My concern would be you build the building without the window, the mural goes away in 10 years, you're now left with a building with no windows. So, it's a commitment to continue then to have a mural in perpetuity, essentially. But I would be okay with some percentage of replacement for the purposes of artwork. But again, I think that it's important to point out that then commits that property owner to maintaining a mural for the lifetime of the building. So.
Any other thoughts?
Okay. So this is the last discussion question I have. Is the percentage appropriate for landscaping material reduction? Again, the proposed percentage was 25%. And just for reference, the required landscaping materials are 1 tree per 2,500 square feet of developable landscaping area and 1 shrub per 1,000 square feet of developable landscaping area.
Thoughts? Commissioner White.
No. I guess is the shortest way for me to say this. Love art, as was stated, art everywhere all the time is great, but I don't think art should be a replacement for shrubs and trees. I think particularly given our need for climate abatement, I think anything that replaces trees and shrubs with an impermeable surface is a bad idea. So,
My notes here said I want to hear what Commissioner White has to say about this. And in general, I totally agree with you. And the other thing I was thinking about is, like, I'm okay with incentivizing this, but I don't want to incentivize it with something else we already, like something we want. Like, I would rather incentivize it with something we don't want, like parking or, I don't know, but why trade off something else we want instead of something we don't really want? So I would rather trade it off for, and I know that gets complicated with the opportunity housing ordinance where we're already doing a lot of that stuff. And so, but I'm not really I'm not in favor of trading off landscaping for art. Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. You talked a lot about incentivizing. I'm 99% certain that this piece of art on screen is at Excelsior and Grand in St. Louis Park. And I'm 99% certain that this artwork and roundabout was part of a public-private partnership between the developer and the city and the TIF note that was issued for the parcel. So maybe that would be a better way to incentivize art as a condition of a TIF note approval, since we seem to be having a lot of those in the city. Just a thought. But I concur with my colleagues that we really want to push green space, especially in areas where we're trying to drive density. You have enough hard surface already, and with the tighter setbacks, especially in South Loop, I think that art is great, but having some greenery is better. Thank you.
Other thoughts? Commissioner Summers.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with a lot of the sentiments here that I'm against green space being minimized. I think especially in a city like Bloomington, where we have a lot of pavement and hard spaces, over time not having the tree cover will make our city hotter. So apart from the way that trees and greenery help process pollution, it also for me is an issue for energy use, or for if people can't afford air conditioning, that their neighborhood being several degrees, like 1 or 2 degrees hotter, makes a huge impact. And we see that in cities like St. Paul, where the Frogtown Midway area has a significant lack of tree cover and has taken a huge concerted effort between the city and nonprofits to recoup that tree cover.
Any other thoughts? Commissioner Issa.
My take, thank you, Chair. I think my take is fine, except for places in the city that are higher on like the heat map index. And so requiring basically I would agree if it's relatively, it's not like a heat island, I guess, per se, relatively so, yeah.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Commissioner Munster?
If you're still looking for yes, no, I concur with the chairman and Commissioner White.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Hestbech. Next one.
So that was my last discussion question. Do you have any other questions for me or anything else that stood out for you that you all want to discuss?
Not seeing any.
Okay. Thank you. So again, you'll see this again at the miscellaneous issues public hearing, which is scheduled for October 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hestbech. And the City Council will study this on September 29th.
Oh, yes, at the miscellaneous issues. Thank you, I was confused. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move then to item number 2. The City of Bloomington, again, is the applicant. We will be studying commercial vehicles in residential districts. Ms. Durley Navarro, you have our staff report.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Darlene Navarro, and I will be presenting commercial vehicles in residential districts tonight. For our agenda, we are going to do a quick project overview, the purpose, why, goals of the project. We're going to review the Bloomington's current allowance, peer cities review, community engagement feedback from Pride event, and Let's Talk Bloomington page. We will also be reviewing some commercial vehicle violations issued by the Environmental Health Division, and we're going to end with the open discussion or questions and the project timeline. So the why of the project, the zoning code limits what type of commercial vehicles and trailers can be parked or stored in residential zones. These standards have increasingly become the subject of enforcement cases for the Environmental Health Division, as the size, height, design, and other characteristics of commercial vehicles and trailers continue to change over time. And the goal of this project is to ensure that current standards are consistent with the type of commercial vehicles used or that want to be used in residential areas. And at the same time, we want to increase the opportunity to support small businesses who may need to store work-related vehicles at the residence. So I wanted to add the summary table of the zoning code section 21.301.20, which is vehicles and trailer parking and storage in residential zones, to reflect the complexity of our current code. It is a little bit hard to understand, but the main points of this ordinance that we currently allowed are type 1 vehicles. These are vehicles up to 8 feet in height and 22 feet in length. We also allowed type 2 vehicles. These are taxis, limousines, or snowplows equipped vehicles that are the same size as type 1 vehicles, and trailers up to 6 feet in height and 8.6 feet in length. We prohibit commercial vehicles or any type 3 or oversized vehicles. I will give a little bit more detail about the maximum quantity allowed later on the presentation. So staff reached out to the cities of Edina, Burnsville, Brooklyn Park, Blaine, Lakeville, and St. Louis Park to see how they handle commercial vehicles parking in residential districts. Edina is very strict, no commercial vehicles allowed in residential lots. Burnsville is a little bit more flexible, 1 vehicle up to 22 feet if used daily, with some rules for trailers and overnight parking. Brooklyn Park allows 1 commercial vehicle per home, but they don't allow any big trucks or semi-trucks. Blaine allows vehicles under 12,000 pounds if they're licensed and working. Lakeville allows some mid-size vehicles and some RVs, but no street parking unless loading and unloading. And lastly, St. Louis Park allows up to 2 vehicles, and they have size and weight limits. So overall, each city has different rules. The main difference are about vehicle size, weight, how many vehicles are allowed per property, and where they can park. But the big takeaway is that cities try to balance the needs for work vehicles with keeping neighborhoods safe, healthy, and pleasant. So staff conducted community engagement through tabling at the Bloomington Pride event, where we asked residents, do you feel this type of commercial vehicles are appropriate to be stored or parked in residential areas? And they answered the questions by placing stickers where they feel appropriate, so yes, no, and maybe with restrictions. So thanks to our Bloom in Bloomington intern, we were able to count all the stickers from the event, and several responders voiced support for allowing commonly used work vehicles such as vans, pickup, small trailers, and especially when used by residents and stored neatly in private driveways. There was a strong interest in supporting residents-owned businesses and a need of clear rules of our ordinance. As we get to bigger commercial vehicles such as shipping containers and semi-trucks, responders were not in support of allowing parking or storage in residential districts. We also did a public survey available on the City of Bloomington Livestock page from June 26 to July 31st. We received 10 responses, and the report was included in the agenda packet for tonight. Many responders support allowing work vehicles and trailers at home, especially for contractors, tradespeople, and small business owners. They express the vehicles should be well kept, reasonable size, and not block views or driveways. Residents want flexibility since these vehicles are essential for them to work. And some people share concerns about the cost and inconvenience when vehicles cannot be parked at home. Sometimes renting off-site storage is expensive, time-consuming, and less efficient. And in some cases, it even increases fuel use and emissions for the environment. So in summary, our residents are asking for a balanced approach, one that respects neighborhood standards, but also makes life easier for people who depend on work vehicles every day. So in 2024, Bloomington's Environmental Health Division issued about 280 violations for parking and storage commercial vehicles or trailers in residential areas. Most of these violations happen because the vehicles were too tall, too long, or not allowed in residential zones. The biggest problem that we can see is oversized trailers. Over half of the cases with 141 violations. And then other common violations were flatbed trailers, dump trucks, and cargo box trucks. And these are often used by contractors or service providers. We also saw equipment-heavy vehicles, usually tied to landscaping or construction work. And then we have less common but still notable step vans, food trucks, tow trucks, and semi-trucks. So we looked at how the sizes of today's vehicles compare to Bloomington's current code rules. What we found is that many modern vehicles are simply bigger than our rules allowed. For example, small vehicles like taxis are about the same size as normal cars. And then we have cargo vans, which are bigger, usually 10 to 20 feet long and about 7 feet tall. So many newer vehicles now go over 8 feet in height, which triggers violations under our current rules. And utility trailers are often longer than 8.6 feet, so they also break our current limits. And then box trucks and food trucks can be anywhere from 16 to 26 feet long, and the height could be up to 12 feet. So the main takeaway by doing this research is that many common vehicles today are bigger than Bloomington's current size limits allowed. So this means that our rules no longer fit reality, and that's why we need to rethink the size limits, definitions, and restrictions in our ordinance so they can be up-to-date, enforceable, and reflect how vehicles are built and used today by our residents. So again, this is a study item, so no formal action is requested from the Planning Commission at this time. Staff is just seeking direction on key questions, and if directed by City Council, the ordinance will be drafted and presented later this year.
Thank you, Ms. Navarro. Why don't we start with any questions for staff? Commissioner Munster.
The only question I have is on the complaint information. Is it tracked whether those violations are the result of complaints or proactive enforcement?
Chair, Commissioners, that's a good question. So I actually received a spreadsheet from Environmental Health. So it could be both. It could be concerns, concerns from other neighbors or just enforcement cases. But from the community engagement that we did at Pride, I think the common theme was more of like enforcement cases. People were more upset about our rules than neighbors parking their work-related vehicle at the properties.
Commissioner Linay.
Thank you, Chair. Follow-up question to that. Do we know if all of the complaints on the spreadsheet are initial complaints or are some of them repeat complaints against repeat offenders?
Chair, Commissioners, those violations are just for one property, so they're not repeated complaints.
Commissioner White.
I'd be curious, could you remind us, if possible, like what the requirements are for RVs that are allowed to be parked on properties, RVs and trail, like sports trailers and things like that? I remember that being quite a discussion.
Yeah, Chair, Commissioners, that is a good question. So for RVs, and it's a little bit of a tough topic because that came up on during our community engagement where people were upset about trailers being bigger than sometimes their work-related vehicles. So on top of my head, RVs, they can be. Let me actually share the handout with you if I can. So we have setbacks for the RVs, and then they must not exceed 11 feet in height at any point, and they must not exceed 25 feet in length. Do you have any other questions about RVs?
Commissioner Issa.
Thank you, Chair. Question. Thank you for the presentation, by the way. It was nice. For the RV or the trailer length, the 25 feet, how is that determined? Because, I guess that's my question first.
Chair, Commissioner Issa, do you mean for the current rules that we have?
Yeah, for the current rules.
I will defer to the planning manager. I'm not sure about the history and how we came up with a number at that time.
Mr. Johnson.
And just to clarify, thank you, Chair. You're clarifying Commissioner Issa's question, you're talking about recreational vehicles or commercial trailers? Just to clarify. We have different standards for both.
The 25-foot was for trailers, right?
25 feet in length is
RVs.
for recreational
Oh,
vehicles.
recreational. Okay. Yeah, I guess for that, as well as the other one too, but curious about that.
Yeah, the measurement would effectively happen from the tongue of the trailer to the kind of furthest back portion of it. So it would be the full extent. And so there's always some portion of it that has to do with the rigging or the attachment component to the vehicle towing it. So it's not the flat portion of the trailer or the usable portion of the trailer is 25 feet. It's typically the full length of the apparatus.
Mr. Johnson, do you know how we arrived at 25 feet?
Yeah, Chair, I don't know the specifics, but I do know that when the city established regulations around recreational vehicles, similar to the exercise that Ms. Navarro is doing this evening, we did a lot of research about kind of common recreational vehicles at that time. Similar to commercial vehicles and trailers, it's changed a lot in the last many years. The recreational vehicle ordinance, I believe, was updated in, I want to say, 2019 or 20 by Planning Manager Glenn Markegard. And there was a lot of public engagement and activity on that one. So I believe they reevaluated some of those size thresholds as part of that most recent update. There is some interaction between the RV ordinance and these standards, so we do need to kind of mitigate or rectify some of the problem points between the two standards. But other than that, we're trying to not kind of open that can of worms, for lack of a better term. And I see, well, I'll let the chair run the traffic, sorry.
Mr. Toski has turned his camera on. Do you have a comment, Mr. Toski?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Chair and Commission. Good evening. I would just say that the RV ordinance is kind of similar to the vehicle ordinance. It sets out two classes of RVs. So class 1 is a rec vehicle with a length of less than 20 feet and a height of less than 6 feet. And then a class 2 RV is anything with a length of 20 feet or more, a height of 6 feet or more. You can't have any RV over 40 feet. That's prohibited. And then there's certain standards about where you can park them, on the side of the house, setbacks, things like that. But it does, like the planning manager discussed, it works in conjunction with the vehicle ordinance and the trailer ordinance. So there's interaction there. So we just have to be mindful of that. But it's pretty similar in kind of how it sets out the different RV classes and stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Toski. Commissioner Issa?
I think I don't want to open the can of worms, but I think potentially a better approach may be based off driveway length, specifically to driveways. I feel like because if someone has a trailer and it could fit in their driveway, but it's technically not within code, I think and obviously you count for the car attaching whatever length, and so I think that would be a better approach than just having a specific number, And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned that there were more people concerned about the rules than their neighbors that
Chair, Commissioners, yeah, that's correct. So a lot of people were expressing their concerns about them getting the violations or, the rules, our current rules, than just letting people park their work-related vehicles or trailers in their property.
Commissioner White.
This is always such a tough thing because there are people who really hate to sit and look at their neighbor's driveway full of vehicles, and there are people who don't care. And so trying to find that middle threshold of keeping the community looking nice, but also recognizing that people live here and this is their property and they have their own needs, is that constant balance that I feel like the city's called upon to maintain. So I have a lot of sympathy for that as someone who parks several vehicles in my driveway on a regular basis. So I guess my personal opinion is that it definitely does need to be updated. I think if you're allowing people to park large recreational vehicles in their driveway, they should be allowed to park a work trailer or work vehicle as long as it's maintained and it's functional and it's not, presenting a danger of blocking sidewalks or blocking views, for folks, in an intersection or something like that. All those things that you look at when you're looking at parking regulations. I don't, however, think that parking semis or buses or, huge, obviously very large commercial vehicles don't belong in residential neighborhoods. In my opinion, I don't think the streets are built for it. I don't think the driveways are built for it. I don't think that it's fair to the neighbors to expect that kind of traffic in the neighborhood on a daily basis. So, we can go through and draw the line however that needs to be drawn. But I guess for, trailers and smaller commercial vehicles where the owners are living there and they need that vehicle every day, I'm sympathetic to that, and I'm inclined to update those restrictions to be more flexible.
Thank you, Commissioner White. I think Commissioner White started it, and I'll ask that we start to guide our conversation to the three guiding questions being asked of us here. So perhaps I'll start with question 1 there, which was the overall size. Sorry, Ms. Navarro, could we go back a slide? Thank you. The vehicle and trailer size thresholds. I hate to be such a stick in the mud, but I'm kind of in favor of what Edina is doing. I don't really like seeing if I lived in a small and quiet neighborhood, I think I would be annoyed if somebody had their construction trailer and stuff parked out on the street. But I will say the sticker diagram that we got from the Pride event, that was like some of the best public feedback we've ever got. I learned so much from that. And it looks like 87% of Bloomington residents disagree with me on that. And so I can support this, even though I don't personally think I would like it. I think the feedback we got from residents was pretty clear on quite a few of these items. So that's kind of where I'm at. Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. I concur. I do live in a quiet neighborhood. I'm in favor of it helping out people that have small businesses that they run out of their homes. I think that it's important to be able to have your trailer or your materials there, and you don't have to incur that extra cost. Kind of lower the barriers to entry to have your own business. So I'm fine with this.
Commissioner Summers.
Thank you, Chair. I live across the street from a small owned business that is parking on the street, and I also live in a neighborhood without stop signs and sidewalks. So when I think about the vehicle and trailer side thresholds, one of the things that I'm kicking around is larger vehicles being not as safe for the kiddos walking around or biking around our neighborhood, which also represents that adults could get hit by a vehicle as well. And I usually assume that people are operating their they don't want to hit anybody, they're operating them safely. So for me, the size threshold, I want to know what's the interaction with the safety for the people who are living in those neighborhoods. I think what I saw in a lot of the community feedback was that people really cared about these small businesses that are in their neighborhoods that are operating in this way, that they're willing to make space for. I don't want to look at a food truck, but I would be willing to make space for a food truck in my neighborhood with a neighbor that I cared about having a good relationship with, and small businesses help communities thrive. So I think the main thing for me with size is what is safe for the people who are walking and biking around.
Thank you, Commissioner Summers. Commissioner Linay.
I generally am supportive of it, of allowing this. I also live in a very, very residential neighborhood, but have a young neighbor that just started a contracting business, and it's been very convenient to have him across the street. But what I will say is I do think that we need to make sure that there is a linkage between the business and the resident, or I shouldn't say need. I think we should consider whether or not we have something that says for larger vehicles over a certain size, they must be registered to one of the people in the residence or something like that. Because I think what we want to avoid, and this has been an issue in some cities I've lived in, is people choosing to park their food truck there because it's convenient to where they're going to go the next day versus they actually live in the neighborhood. And I think that from the feedback and from the conversation we're having here today, I think we're all supportive of making it, or I shouldn't say all, but most of us are supportive of making it easier for people in Bloomington to start these businesses and run these businesses. But what I don't want to have is people who live 30 miles beyond Bloomington parking their stuff here so they don't have to burn the fuel on their low mileage trucks. They could take their electric cars to get here and then swap them out during the day. And I think as the metro area gets bigger and bigger, that becomes a bigger and bigger risk. So I'd like to see some sort of correlation between a resident in Bloomington or business owner in Bloomington or something like that for the larger vehicles that we consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Linay. Ms. Navarro, did I jump ahead in your presentation here and you have more slides, or?
I do have more slides, and they're more like questions, so I want your feedback on sides, stuff like that.
Yeah, why don't we skip ahead to that? I'm sorry for moving ahead.
Oh, you're fine. Okay, so the first question that I have, based on what we've learned, so we develop a series of ranges from more restrictive option to less restrictive option. So my first question is, what height and length limits do you feel are appropriate for commercial vehicles and trailers in residential areas, given the type of vehicles commonly used today? And just as a reminder, we currently allowed 8 feet high, 22 feet long for vehicles, and 6 feet high and 8.6 feet long for trailers. And just a quick reminder, we don't allow any commercial vehicles.
Thoughts, Commissioner Munster?
All right, thanks. And this is actually the perfect slide for it. So I think I'm to kind of go to where the conversation was a minute ago. I'm generally in support of increasing the standard somehow. Where I have a problem are the box trucks. So in previous lives, I've been on the enforcement side of these things, and the general idea of allowing commercial vehicles in residential areas is that they're of a similar character. So if you think about the phone company van, it's the same basic, Ford Econoline that a family might have. It's just used for commercial purposes. And, so in looking at our current standards with the 8 foot height for a vehicle, a Sprinter van, which is kind of the most common thing, is about 9 feet high. I don't know that anything is compelling us to go all the way up to 12 to allow a truck that can move a 3-room apartment. I think we need to balance that increase, perhaps just scale it back a bit from sort of the moderate option that's proposed to make sure that we truly are capturing the general class of vehicles that you would find in a neighborhood, and that it's not these trucks that are 4 or 5 feet off the ground, so neighbors are sort of looking at the undercarriage as they drive down the street.
Thank you, Commissioner Munster. Commissioner Issa?
Thank you, Chair. My initial take, I usually like to wait till the end to give my take just to hear more feedback, but I would go with the less restrictive option. One, because anecdotally, if, like you mentioned, if more neighbors are concerned about restrictions versus their neighbors having small businesses, they're operating vehicles through their home, I think that says something there. But also, like, if you do imagine, let's say someone does have some of these box trucks, right, and they do operate a small business, and they do live there, right, of course, they would have to park it off-site, right, pay rent for storage, which a lot of these storage facilities are, like, national. So they're paying these national companies. They would have to either Uber or take a family member to drop them off every morning to go there, right? Which obviously gas, Uber money, whatever, right? In this economy, things are getting more and more expensive. I don't think that's, if we weigh, oh yeah, I don't like seeing these big trucks in my neighborhood versus my neighbor that's trying to survive, I think it's a no-brainer, at least for me personally, and I don't think every single person is operating that small business, so like we wouldn't see it pop up in every lot. So I would just say we should be mindful of that and think in that way, if we care about small businesses and things like that. So that's my take.
Thank you, Commissioner Issa. Commissioner White.
I guess I'm somewhere between the moderate and less restrictive in terms of, taxis and the limousines and the trailers. I think that, the trailer height and size and things like that being sort of somewhere in the range of what we allow for RVs feels a little more fair to me. Again, I share some concerns about the big cargo trucks. I think there's a difference for me too about if they're parking on the street or parking in the driveway. That to me also makes a little bit of a difference to me, because I care a little bit less if it's parked in your driveway than if it's parked on the street, just to be really honest about it. But I do share some of those same concerns, but I'm inclined to go with the the looser height and length restrictions, because I think we'll just be back here again in a couple of years, adjusting them again as things go. So that's where I guess that's where I am for now.
Thank you, Commissioner White. Restating my position, I guess I'm off the charts here as the Edina option of allowing nothing. But if I was to look at some compromising here, I too have some concerns about the box truck. When I look at the data collected from the Pride event, the box truck scored very similarly to semis and shipping containers. And so that to me says our residents are concerned about having box trucks in their neighborhoods. So I would hesitate, if I'm going to be compromising here, to allow box trucks. Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. I like the moderate option, and I'm nervous about designing. Well, we're not. This is a study item, so we're not doing anything from the dais here. But these step up vans, or the food trucks that are the drivable food truck you see a lot is similar in volume to a box truck. And so I feel like we're singling out something small that, it convolutes the clarity of the code. And I'm respectfully will disagree with your, I'm also looking at the polka dots and the great public engagement on that, by the way. It looks like there's a ton of maybes where people just didn't know. There's definitely a lot of no's on shipping containers and semi-truck cabs and trailers, which I agree with. But yeah, there's very few yeses on box trucks, but a lot of maybes. And so I think the moderate option is good as kind of a next step. I was just looking on Penske's website here. Looks like they have 22 to 26 foot box trucks for rent for small businesses. So maybe getting the shorter ones would be a good kind of first step into the neighborhood. But I think that we shouldn't eliminate a specific class of large vehicle, commercial vehicle, from our code. I feel like it might be legally gray. Planning Manager Johnson.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Cookton, and I invite Durley to add anything she wants to this comment that I'll make here, but I think that is of interest to the city's environmental health staff and legal staff, is that one of the challenges of our current standards is that we identify specific types of commercial vehicles as not allowed, kind of irrespective of their actual dimensions. And so we do want to try and land somewhere where we're being more consistent. We're measuring the same thing on each type of commercial vehicle, whether it be height, length. Some cities use gross weight, or there's some other standards that can be applied. But I appreciate the commentary on some feedback on specific types of trucks, but I just will share that does get kind of some frustrated or some feedback from the public when other similar type vehicles or similarly sized type vehicles are allowed, but specific ones are not. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but
No.
Yeah.
Commissioner Linday.
Thanks. So I generally am between the moderate and less restrictive option. I don't necessarily have a huge issue with the size. As mentioned, I have concerns about whether or not they're operated by people who live in Bloomington. And then the other two things I would want to make sure we clearly spell out, and this may already be in there, are that they be operable and that there be a maximum on the number of vehicles that can be tied to any one particular residence. I think what, in this day and age where people are moving or have been moving away from office space, what I don't want to do is have someone de facto turn a house into a place where they're operating a business for 30 people with 7 different trucks lined up and people coming to work to avoid renting commercial office space. And I think that can be very disadvantageous also to the neighborhood. If, for example, you have one house on the block taking up 60% of the parking on the street for what their operations are. So I think there need to be some limits so that we ensure that we are honoring the commitment to enabling small business, but not at the expense of the neighbors who live there having a place to park and when they have visitors and things like that over as well.
Mr. Isa.
Thank you, Chair. I know exactly what you're talking about because I was when I was operating Airbnbs, not in Bloomington, though, but other cities. And I would sometimes rent it to contractors, and they would have a bunch of the whole crew basically, and it'd be a nuisance. So I definitely know what you're talking about there. As far as getting back to this, it seems, at least with this chart, the only difference between, like, if we quantify or objectify, for lack of a better term, like the difference between moderate and less restrictive, it's only that one would have 26-foot box trucks because the length max is 26, and also the moderate option says some, and the less restrictive probably meaning the 26-foot food trucks, you'd be able to operate it there, So if we're to, like, I guess with this chart or analysis, it's between that from, right? At least that's how I view it, right? And so I think I think Commissioner Linné, you've said earlier, like, I definitely think there should be some verification if we were to do less restrictive of, like, anyone that does go to that max, that they're a resident there, they live there. And,
Chair, Commissioner, so that's a great point. So for the less restrictive option, we have some because for trailers, they can go anywhere from 8 feet to 32 feet. So it wouldn't be all of them allowed. It will be up to 26 feet in length. So that's why we have that some language in there. And then to address Commissioner Linné comment, we do have a question regarding the quantity limits later on in the presentation.
Mr. Johnson, do you have something to add?
Yeah, Chair Cookton, thank you. And the code actually does require for type 2 commercial vehicles that they be tied to a resident of the home. I don't know why that doesn't apply across the board. That certainly is something we can look into as to why they tied that requirement specifically to type 2 and not type 1 as well. I agree with you. I think it makes sense that if you're parking a vehicle, it should be connected to the resident. And Durley mentioned that there is a existing restriction on the number of overall vehicles tied to a site, so we'll get into that later.
Commissioner White.
Thank you, Chair. I would imagine there's probably something in there due to the fact that sometimes folks will drive their work truck home, but it's not in their name, or, they may not own the business, but they have access to the commercial vehicle and use it to get back and forth to work as a perk of the job, or, as a favor to the boss of parking it in their house instead of at the office. So I would imagine that might be part of the challenge we would face in defining what tied to a resident means.
Mr.
Chair,
Johnson?
Commissioners, that's correct. We actually had a few residents share that concern that sometimes in order to work for that company, they need to take that work related vehicle and park it in their home. So,
if I may build off that a second, Chair Cookton, that is feedback we've gotten that a lot of these standards do relate to small businesses, certainly, but we've gotten feedback from a few folks interested in this project that Durley's correct that their companies actually instruct them that if it is further to drive back to the trade shop where they are working, it makes more sense for them to bring their vehicle home. So they are kind of put in between a rock and a hard place with respect to their place of employment and the city regulations, which do not allow that. Both, I'm sure, from the business standpoint, it's fuel cost savings, certainly, but there probably is some sustainability benefit in terms of less emissions overall in the region as well. The thing I was going to point out is that language I mentioned about being tied to the resident. It currently says that the vehicle is owned or leased or regularly used by the person residing on the premises. So I think it accounts for that, but I think we should look at whether or not that should be more uniformly applied to all commercial vehicles, not just one specific type.
Commissioner Summers.
Thank you, Chair. So when I look at the graph of prohibited vehicle violations, it appears to me like the oversized trailer accounts for half of the violations. So when I look between the restrictive, moderate, and less restrictive option, and if part of this is to reduce some of those violations, it seems like the oversized trailer is the one that's coming up almost every other day. It's tough to know these oversized trailers because they can be such different sizes. And I noticed that the trailers on here, the restrictive option is 8.6 feet. The next option is 22 feet. Is that because they kind of go from about 8 to 10 feet to much larger?
Chair, Commissioner, that's correct. And I actually, so we had a staff kickoff meeting of this project. So there was a staff from environmental health, legal, engineering, police, different divisions and departments. And environmental health actually said that they are willing to increase the limits for trailers up to 8 feet and 22 feet long. And it will be easier for them to enforce. So that's why we came up with that number for trailers.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Munster.
Just as an observation, I don't think our goal should be reducing violations or making it easier for environmental health to enforce, fewer complaints. I think we just need to make sure that we are looking at what is reasonable, not what in a perfect world everybody would like.
Commissioner Isa.
Thank you, Chair. Just to summarize, I know I spoke a lot, but I think obviously more restrictive has caused city staff significant resources in just handing these fines or whatever out unnecessarily, especially when neighbors don't see a problem with it. If we were to go moderate and versus less restrictive, or if we were to debate the two, let's say, I think it's a 4-foot difference, right? People would be able to have 26-footers, basically box trucks or whatever. And so I would lean more towards having less restrictive, seeing how that plays out, and if needed, if it's fine, no complaints, okay, cool, we're at a place. But if there are, then maybe going back to moderate, but keeping it open like that. And I do think a goal should be for city staff to have more resources at their disposal if through having, how do I word this? Basically, I think unnecessary fines are not necessary, so I would disagree with that, Commissioner Munster, on that. But yeah, thank you.
Mr. Toski, did I see a hand there?
Oh no, I can address some of the enforcement issues if you wanted. I was gonna speak up, but just Chair and Commissioners, I think oversized trailers is probably the biggest complaint, and then we get to enforce on. So the way the city enforces is through fines generally. So you'll get a series of notices if you're in violation, and it gets to a fine stage. And the fine for generally having an oversized trailer is $250. And then once a fine is established and if the violation continues, environmental health will do quarterly fines. So just from legal's perspective, I guess, if there's a difference of 4 feet or a couple feet in trailer length that can help, that doesn't have an appreciable effect on the neighborhood aesthetics or property values, things like that, and it reduces the amount of fines the city issues, I think that's a win-win, just because, someone's rights and financial livelihood get, affected when we enforce. And our environmental health does a good job. They'll enforce, what's on the books. So I do think it's relatively a good thing to have less fines out there if it can be balanced with reasonability, like Commissioner Munster talked about. So just my 2 cents on what I see from the enforcement side, because I do work with environmental health as well.
Thank you, Mr. Toski. Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Issa, I agree with your sentiment that between 22 and 26 feet is not a huge jump. But I disagree when you were saying, oh, well, if 26 proves to be too long, we can change it back. I feel like it's easier to grow than to constrict a requirement. So if there is no measurable lowering of the number of trailer fines. If we were going to go with the moderate option, then yeah, I'd be in favor of going to 26 feet. But if keeping it at 22 feet eliminates 90% of the issues, and a majority of the tickets that are then being sent are, for like a 40-foot intermodal shipping container trailer, then I think that, we want to slowly grow as opposed to grow and then backtrack on it. From a optics, if this has been frustrating to members of the city, as Planning Manager Johnson mentioned, I think that slowly growing as opposed to growing and then constricting would be the better path. Thank you.
Commissioner Linay.
Thank you, Chair. I think to build on that, I think one of the questions and I don't know if this data is available, when environmental health issues the citations, do they indicate the size of the truck? Like, if someone parks a truck, would it be possible to get the data on how many of the violations were issued for trucks in the 16 to 20 foot range versus how many were in 20 plus? Because I think that would be useful if it's, I can't remember what the number of citations issued was, but if it was 70 citations were issued and 68 of them were for trucks that were, 18 feet long, then I think that is a very different conversation than if it's 70 citations were issued and 60 of them were trucks 26 feet or longer. I think that might be useful data, since this is just a study session, to help get to the right point, maybe.
Chair, Commissioners, so I did ask environmental health for that data. I know the data that they sent me didn't have any measurements on the vehicles. I don't know if they have that available, or maybe if Kevin Tusky can talk about it, since he works closely with the environmental health division.
Mr. Tusky.
Yeah, hi, Chair, Commissioners. It's generally it's an up or down kind of yes or no question. They don't track, because you can't get on private property to measure, obviously. So it's kind of a guesswork almost. And we don't have actually that many trailers that are close to the limit. A lot of them are the enclosed trailers on the height. And that's the big thing with those enclosed trailers that have a roof on them. The height is always the big thing. So if they're, generally they're over 8 feet tall, and that's where the fine gets in trouble. But they don't track the length of the trailer or the height of the trailer, just because it's too hard to, you'd have to get on private property and do that. And obviously they take pictures from the road, or with the consent of the neighbor, they take pictures from there. But unless someone welcomes you onto the property for a measurement, it's hard to get that data.
Thank you, Mr. Tosky. Mr. Johnson?
Nope, he said it. I'm good.
Very good. Other feedback? I think that's as clear as we can be.
Okay, on to the next question. How should the ordinance address vehicles equipped with work-related attachments, such as ladder, toolboxes, roof-mounted equipment, and should those attachments count towards vehicle height and length limits? And I put some pictures at the bottom of the slide to see how, those equipments might look like.
Commissioner Munster.
Just a question. Is there a standard in the code now for how vehicle height is measured from the ground to something?
I don't remember on top of my head, so planning manager.
Mr. Johnson?
Chair Cook and Commissioner Munster, there is, and I believe it's from the ground up to the tallest permanent attachment. But let me get you the precise, and maybe if we can circle back.
Thank you.
Get you the precise.
Chair, Commissioners, I have it pulled up so I can. It's the height of, I'm just quoting here from City Code. The height of a motor vehicle is measured as the vertical distance between the lowest part of the tires to the top of the highest part of the vehicle. So that's what it says right now. And then the length is measured as the horizontal distance between the front edge of the vehicle to the rear edge of the vehicle. And then it says, for the purpose of measurement, accessories, attachments, and materials fixed or carried upon a vehicle will be considered part of the vehicle, with the exception of aerial antennas and attached trailers. So there you have it.
So just to clarify, so the more restrictive option that we're seeing on the screen is basically the definition today?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody? Commissioner White.
I think the challenge about this one is what defines permanent. I mean, technically ladders can be removed, but if they're always there, I would consider them permanent. If in the picture you have here, you have the trailer with the piece of equipment on it. Generally I think we're talking about the trailer, but if the equipment is always on it, then it seems unfair not to factor the equipment in. So that's, I think, the challenge of this. And I guess I tend to think that you have to look at the height of the with the things attached to it. Not just pretend they're not there. But I'm not sure exactly the definition of permanent, if it can be removed. I know that's a tricky one, probably.
Commissioner Munster.
That's the same thought I have. I mean, my inclination is moderate option. But again, what is permanent? If we look at the little pickup truck in the top left corner there, the black rack on the back of it can be removed. I mean, not on a daily basis, that would be crazy, but it could be. So would that count as permanent? So I think we need to sort of know more how that would be defined or applied.
Commissioner Issa.
Thank you, Chair. I would say either we would to stick with more restrictive or less, because I think the middle just is going to be, it's too subjective, or it would cause disputes. So that's my take.
Commissioner Linay. Oh, just a pencil wave. Okay.
Should we move on to the next question? Okay, so how many trailers and work-related vehicles should be allowed per residential property? So currently, we allowed 4 vehicles outside our garage and 1 trailer, and no commercial vehicles.
Well, my vote remains 0, but that's again not on the chart here. Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. My vote would be 1 commercial vehicle, 1 trailer. And then see if we run into issues. I'm thinking about a lot of this is going to be an R1 zoning. A lot of the lot sizing is not, the driveways aren't very long. They're not very big. So I'd be cautious to go more than 1 and 1. Thank you.
Ms. Navarro, you're allowed to park on anywhere on the street, right? It doesn't have to be in front of your house, just in general. Is there anything precluding you from parking your work truck in front of your neighbor's house instead of your house?
Chair, Commissioner, so right now, parking on the street is not allowed. You can only park on your private property or driveway.
Okay. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, thanks. And I'll just correct the record on it a little bit. We do have a lot of streets that do have parking restrictions. So it's a posted parking restriction on some streets. Some streets, on-street parking is allowed. We don't regulate that you're parking right immediately in front of your residence. It's either a no parking condition or a yes parking condition, and the maximum length of parking is 48 hours. So no, we don't regulate that it has to be directly in front of your residence, if that was the specific question.
Commissioner Issa?
How do you regulate the 48 hours if they move every 8 hours? Let's not get
Commissioner
that.
Issa, it is an enforcement challenge, and I would say that for that reason, that particular provision typically only comes up if a vehicle clearly has been not moved for a very long period of time, typically evidence in the wintertime by snow removal or other things along those lines. That's where it most often comes up.
Commissioner Munster?
Just a question to follow up on the on-street parking. It probably wouldn't be under zoning. It shouldn't be under zoning. But is there a maximum length or size of a vehicle that can be parked on a street?
Yeah, Chair Commissioner Munster, I mean, that's what you're seeing reflected in these standards, in effect, is the commercial vehicle standards that you're reviewing also apply to parking within the public right-of-way as well.
So we're applying our zoning ordinance to the public right-of-way?
The ordinance does have a linkage to that parking. These standards do apply to parking in the residential districts. Technically, this is very wonky, but the zoning districts in residential districts, it does go to the center of the right-of-way, technically. So yes, these standards do apply to public right-of-way.
So I'm sure I know the answer to this. How do you enforce it if you don't know whose truck that is parked in front of the house?
Yeah, Chair, Commissioner Munster, I mean, I'd invite Kevin in to speak more on the enforcement side of things, but for the most part, I think it is pretty clear who the vehicle is tied to. And most of them, I'd say the majority of the citations or orders that are issued, it's not always a fine right away. I want to be clear about that. The environmental health staff does try and work with people to gain compliance before resorting to a fine. But usually it is on private property that these vehicles are being parked for the most part.
Anything to add there, Mr. Tusky?
Yeah, Chair and Commissioners. So when you think about enforcement, it's generally they're seeing this stuff over like a 40 to 60 day period. So it's repeatedly they come by and see the same vehicles that are parked outside. And generally it's because they don't have enough space in the driveway, so they start using the street outside. And they have access to look up, ownership through the Department of Public Safety lookup, so they can figure out who the vehicle belongs to and stuff like that. But generally when you're seeing it time after time and you're sending 3 to 4 written notices before you get to a fine, it's pretty evident what the problem is at that point because it hasn't changed or isn't getting better. So people do try to play games then and move the cars around and stuff, but I suppose good for them if they can figure out a way to do that. But generally, they're right in front of the house or in the driveway.
Commissioner Issa.
Thank you, Chair. For this, I would say looking at other cities, because we had that city thing, list of cities pulled up and contacting them and seeing what works and doesn't work, and then taking that, bringing it, and then at least that's some data that we could see without doing our own experiment. But yeah, thank you. Sure.
Ms. Navarro, is that something we asked other cities? Is what they require on this item?
Chair, Commissioners, we did ask that, and I don't remember on the top of my head. So if we come back for public hearing, I will have the data for you.
Great. Commissioner White? Nope. A lot of false signals tonight here. Any other thoughts on this item? Commissioner Summers?
With the information provided, the more restrictive option seems like it works the best for me.
Okay.
And I think this is the last question. Should the ordinance include a specific screening or setback requirements for trailer and commercial vehicles, or is regulating the size and number of vehicles sufficient to address visual impact?
Mr. Johnson?
Chair, if I may provide a little bit of context here, some recreational vehicles, depending on their parked location, do require screening, and so some of the questions that we're asking is trying to detangle or kind of address some of these issues of inconsistent application of our RV standards and our commercial vehicle standards. RVs do not have to be screened when being used in the season. The seasonal restrictions apply. So if it's a boat, for example, and it's parked in the driveway, it does not need to be screened during that period of time, for example. But if it was parked in the side or rear yard as kind of the winter storage in this example, then would require some screening. I'm not trying to steer us back to RV. I'm definitely not trying to do that. But just trying to give you context as to why we're asking the question.
Commissioner Munster.
I'll just say thank you for that, because I was actually going to ask about if we could flash the RV standards back on the screen, because I thought that's exactly what it showed, was that there were screening required. Just from, I don't think requiring screening for all commercial vehicles all the time is a reasonable ask at all. But would it be feasible from sort of the practical application side to say that if it is above a certain length or something like that, then the screening requirements come into play, or it has to be behind the front line of the house, or it has to be X feet off of the, off of the property line, or some standard to say that if it's way in front of the house, that might not be the best thing, but if you push it back further, then we're okay with the bigger things. Again, I don't have an answer. I don't have a proposal. It's really just a question.
Ms. Navarro, you've got a graphic up here. Maybe you can walk us through this.
Yeah, Chair, Commissioner, so this is an example of setbacks for RBs. So again, let me just go back to this slide. So for the moderate option, that's what we currently have for setbacks for RBs. So it has to be 5 feet from any property line and at least 10 feet from any sidewalk and at least 20 feet from the back side of any street curb. Did I answer your question? Sorry.
Yes, it did. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Johnson.
Chair Cookton, one last thing I'll add about the screening component, and this comes up frequently with RVs too, is that it's hard to effectively screen taller recreational vehicles, and for that reason, our actual screening standard for recreational vehicles says, it has to be, it's basically 50% of the visible massing of the recreational vehicle needs to be screened. So, I think given the cost and the difficulty of the height component, I think that's what's informing staff's recommendation not to require screening for commercial vehicles. But again, just given the disparate or the different standards for these different similar types of vehicles, we thought it would be worth asking.
Commissioner Issa.
Yeah, I would definitely say the less restrictive option. I trust staff and what you guys did, so that's my take. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner White.
Thank you, Chair. I think it depends on the vehicle for me. I think if it's a work truck, it's a small trailer, it's the, taxi cab kind of thing, then I'm absolutely fine with the less restrictive option. If we actually get to the point where we're going to allow food trucks or box vans or things like that to be parked in driveways, then I think I would probably be interested in exploring some screening requirements, just in the interest of neighborhood peace, potentially. I'm not sure what the right level is, but I think for those larger vehicles, I think there is some argument to be made for some level of screening to be explored.
Anybody else? Okay.
Okay, so that was the last question. So for the project timeline, as I said, we did public engagement from June 22nd to July 31st. We had a staff meeting on July 17th. We are tonight with the study session. We are going to City Council for a study session on September 15, and if it's directed by City Council to update the ordinance, we will be back to the Planning Commission tentative October 9th and back to the City Council on November 17. And thank you so much for your feedback.
Thank you, Ms. Navarro. We will move then to item number 3. Item number 3 this evening, the City of Bloomington again is the applicant. It's regarding the Missing Middle Housing Phase 2 application. Mr. Dakota Kastenday, Planning Supervisor, has the staff report for us. Good evening, Mr. Kastenday.
All right. Good evening, Chair and Planning Commission. I'm going to just give some context and then go through again in another study session format to talk about missing middle housing. So just give a quick project background, kind of walk through the missing middle housing types that we're exploring just to kind of level set for everyone. kind of touch on why we're thinking about missing middle and why we've been talking about it for so long, kind of walk through the different policy considerations for the different types, and then, of course, end with some guiding questions and discussion. So the Planning Division has been kind of formally studying missing middle since late 2023. It's kind of paused a couple of times as we've gone through some different staff transitions, and then there's been some movement at the state in the last 2 legislative sessions related to missing middle that we can talk about. That's also kind of paused some of that. But in its current iteration, we kind of broke this up into 2 phases. So that first phase was adopted back in May of 2025. So that was focused on missing middle types that are already currently allowed in Bloomington. So that included accessory dwelling units, 2-family dwellings or duplexes, and townhouses, and just made some minor tweaks to those standards. So that got adopted in phase 1. Then what we're really talking about tonight here in phase 2 is focusing on establishing performance standards and definitions to permit new housing types in the city. And the overall goal for this project is to encourage development of more kinds of housing types in Bloomington. So I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with this, so I don't need to spend a ton of time, but just to kind of level set, this is a really popular image from Opticos Design that kind of highlights what is missing middle that we're talking about. It's often, sometimes could be referred to as gentle density housing or clustered housing. It's kind of in the middle in that it's between kind of detached single family homes and those 4 or 5 over 1 larger apartment complexes. Sometimes I guess why they refer to it as missing is in a lot of cities, kind of particularly in the kind of post-World War II suburban development boom. A lot of these housing types were either outright prohibited or it was just very difficult to build in the city. And so you just don't see a ton of projects that are in this kind of 2 units to like 20 units kind of in this middle range. So just kind of give you an example there. For this ordinance and kind of Bloomington specific, where we kind of landed was on 5 different missing middle housing types to propose into our city code. So we're looking at triplexes, which are 3 units, 4plexes are 4 units, multiplex, in our case we defined as a smaller apartment building that's between 5 and 16 units. Detached townhomes or villas that you see here, essentially a single family home, but just on a much more narrower lot than what is otherwise permitted. And then cottage courts, which are kind of smaller single family homes oriented around a common open space or courtyard. So why have we been focusing on missing middle so much? At the core, it's trying to provide a variety of housing types for all people at all different stages of life. These housing types are compatible in terms of their bulk and design, or are meant to be compatible with single-family homes in low-density residential neighborhoods. Increasing the production of housing, and in particular, these kind of smaller types of housing can positively impact housing availability and affordability. We're providing more flexibility and choice for residents. These types of housing can support infill opportunities, provide additional homeownership opportunities beyond a standard single-family home, and can create opportunities for residents to age in place in their neighborhoods. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but more just like as an FYI that in the 24 and 2025 legislative session, there's been kind of a number of bills related to increasing housing supply in Minnesota from the state, and a lot of those were really kind of regulating and requiring municipalities to really kind of reduce or create more flexibility in their zoning code and their standards to promote production of housing, and in particular affordable housing. So we can, if people have questions on those, we can certainly talk about it, but just wanted to kind of highlight for some context that things have been happening at the state and how we're kind of approaching that as, you know, it's kind of unpredictable what might happen into 2026, but I imagine these conversations will continue at the state level. But we want to just keep working on this project and try to proactively plan for some of that as best as we can, knowing that things might change at the state level too. Kind of when we're talking about the zoning code, kind of performance standards, typical things that we're looking at are setbacks, our density thresholds, floor area, site area, building height, parking, any kind of open space or landscaping requirement, or some kind of maximum impervious surface coverage. So these are things, again, that we're trying to find that right balance of making sure that something isn't too extreme that it makes it then difficult for someone to construct housing. And so it's definitely a balance on some of these things, but if they're not tweaked the right way, can create a barrier to housing. I just also want to acknowledge that zoning is just kind of one piece of the puzzle. I would argue is kind of, your first step and essential piece. If we don't permit something, it can't be built. But once you then kind of get through the zoning and allow these types of housing to be permitted, there's still a number of factors that kind of come into play around housing production. So availability of project financing, construction cost, availability of skilled labor and construction workers to construct the housing, developer interest and capacity, availability of land, infrastructure capacity, and building code standards all kind of come into play and are all those pieces to housing production. The types that we're looking at today, we would primarily be allowed in land that's guided as low density residential or medium density residential. So this is just a map of all the current land in Bloomington right now that's guided that way in our 2040 comprehensive plan. And then in this current kind of staff proposal, which was kind of based on some previous feedback from study sessions, that there was maybe some hesitancy to allow some of these housing types in our R1 zoning district. And so then we were focusing on our R3, R4, and RM12 zoning districts to kind of be these missing middle housing districts. And I guess what I just want to highlight is that you can see there's not a ton of land that's currently zoned in these districts, and most of this is already currently developed or has proposals to be developed. You can't even see it on this map, but there's only like one parcel right now in the city that's zoned R3. That's that Penn Lake City Home site on 86th and Penn, just as an example. So one of the things in some of our guiding questions and where staff has been trying to figure out where to land, one of the challenges of only allowing it in these zoning districts is that it's going to require some kind of rezoning, zoning entitlement process to allow these. And so that's a highly discretionary application. There's a higher cost to that application. And so that could impact or limit people that maybe were interested in that but don't want to go through that process. So again, just kind of some of those considerations or trade-offs to kind of consider tonight on this, but just wanted some context on those current zones in the city. And then I guess I just wanted to walk through kind of our proposed performance standards. I would say where these proposed standards are, again, to just give some examples to kind of show what this would look like, and they're certainly not final. I would say a lot of these you'll see in some of the questions, again, we try to offer like a spectrum of options. I would say what we're proposing here is kind of in the middle, where I guess our staff recommendation would be to not go more restrictive than this, but are definitely open if for more flexibility. But again, just wanted to kind of walk through it a little bit here. So in this kind of current proposal, we were defining triplexes again as a single structure that contains 3 units. We propose those to be permitted in the R3 zoning district. We proposed shallower setbacks than what is currently allowed in our R3, R4, and RM12 zoning districts, again, as a kind of trade-off to, again, just make land more available and create more opportunities for this kind of housing. There's also a proposal to reduce the site area in R3 from 20,000 square feet to 17,500 square feet. I guess the rationale or the math that we did there is basically if you built a triplex on a 17,500 square foot lot, you get pretty close to 12 units an acre, which is the kind of the cap density for that zoning district, and the low density residential kind of guided land has a 12 unit per acre cap. So basically like just doing some quick back of the envelope math, kind of see where we could tweak that. Height is it's regulated by our height map, and that is a separate project on our work plan this year as well. So you'll actually have a study session kind of next month related to that. So some opportunities there. I think the main concern for staff that we want to address through the height map project is that there are some areas in the city that are guided that medium density residential or MDR, but are limited to 2 stories or 40 feet in our height map, which this kind of 3 stories, 50 feet is kind of the more, I guess, traditional standard that we have for some of our medium and higher density properties. So just wanting to find some alignment there on that. So, but that's why you see 3 stories here is just kind of based on, in general, R3 would be guided that way. We also limit or regulate impervious surface coverage by our zoning district, so that 70% is just what the standard is in R3. One of the considerations we had, I guess, as the trade-off if a lot of these projects would have to go through a rezoning process, was that as long as the site plan and the building itself are code complying, that approval could be done through an administrative final site and building plan. And then, of course, if it needed flexibility, that goes through the Planning Commission and City Council process. In a similar way, it would still require to go through our landscaping and lighting standards, but not necessarily requiring the formal plan that needs to be done by a lighting contractor and a landscaping contractor. Again, is just maybe another trade-off to kind of help reduce the cost on the application for the project. And then the final, probably the big thing that'll be part of the discussion relates to parking. Here, staff was proposing 2 spaces per dwelling, which is matches our single-family home and duplex standard, with the exception that we wouldn't necessarily require an enclosed space in a garage. Again, some of that was to think about, if we're going to require a garage, you're likely going to see more of this kind of side-by-side design, which essentially kind of will look like a townhome kind of design, which might not necessarily work on every site or every infill opportunity. So if there's a way to not require a garage, the thought was that maybe that creates some more opportunities where you get a design like this where you have kind of 2 units on the bottom and 1 above, and just gives more flexibility in the design and to the site context. That being said, we would still have the standards that it has to be some kind of improved surface. There's curb and gutter. You'll have landscaping and those kinds of things to help, I guess, buffer the site of parked vehicles. Fourplexes, we kind of treated in a very similar way. I think the main difference here is that they'd also be allowed in our R4 district, so I don't want to spend too much time there, but just some examples of what that can look like. And kind of throughout this, we kind of treated basically triplexes and fourplexes pretty much the same. I guess one of the other challenges or things that staff has been trying to think about with these standards is that where you see a lot of cities that are doing this work are maybe a little bit more urban in context and have the benefit of having more alleys, where you can have an alley-loaded structure to provide that parking or garage, and then have less impervious surface. And so we do have some areas in East Bloomington that do have alleys where you might be able to get a design that way. But for the most part, projects that we're going to see in Bloomington are probably going to be more of this front-loaded design where it's going to require the driveway to run along the length of the building to get to the parking, which just increases impervious surface on the lot, which then might limit kind of the design or size of the building if you have a parking requirement. So just, again, there's a lot of nuance, and once you kind of get into the details, there's a lot of little things to kind of think about. Multiplexes, again, we were kind of thinking about this in a way of kind of 5 to 16 units. I think there's flexibility there. That was just kind of looking at other cities and how they defined it. Kind of we're somewhere between that 15 and 20 unit maximum range. I think originally we thought maybe 19 units would be the cap, because then our opportunity housing ordinance kind of comes into effect once there's 20 or more units, and if these projects don't really pencil out to begin with, it's probably even less likely that they'd be built once that kind of affordable housing component or requirement is there. So, but again, kind of some flexibility on what that looks like. But these are just some examples of there's one is an existing 8-unit multiplex in Bloomington that would kind of fall under this definition, and the other is an example of a 6-plex that was built in the region. I guess the main difference here, these would be in R4 and RM12. And then for the parking standard, instead of the 2 spaces per unit, we just followed the current multiple family standard, where it's kind of more based on the size of the bedroom. Parking is also another project that's on our 2025 work plan, so there will be more discussion on parking as well. So, there could be an opportunity if we set some standard through the missing middle ordinance, we could always tweak that, or there's another chance to kind of look at that too. So, kind of, I think depending on the discussion, maybe depends on what project it falls under, but I guess all that to say that there'll be an opportunity to talk more about parking as well, and just making sure there's alignment on those 2 projects. For multiplexes, we did propose that it would go through a final site and building plan review that would go to the Planning Commission, and then if it, again, requested flexibility or didn't meet a code standard, then that goes to the Planning Commission for review, but then it goes to the council kind of for the final action. Cottage courts, I would say here the 2 kind of defining factors are that there's a kind of intentionally a maximum floor area to ensure that these are smaller units, kind of more like cottages. So in this case, we were proposing 1,500 square feet, but looking at other cities, some of them limit it to 800 or 900 square feet. So that's one kind of key feature, and then the other is that it's oriented around a common open space or courtyard. So the image on the kind of upper right here kind of just gives you an example or a concept of how you could see someone kind of redeveloping what was 2 single-family home lots, and could get a kind of 6 or 7 unit cottage development. And I just put a note on here, just doing some quick math on some of our different minimum lot sizes. My guess is what you'd probably see typically is like 3 to 7 cottages is what you could probably get. Again, kind of depending on the lot size, and then that kind of 12 unit per acre density threshold comes into play. That will be the factor there. This was one that we did propose to be permitted in R1, just because the design of it is really meant to be a single family home. Again, it's just kind of, instead of oriented towards the street, it's oriented towards a courtyard. I think there was like some previous notes from other study sessions that there was an openness to allow townhouses in R1. And I guess from a staff perspective, there's not really that much difference between these cottage courts and detached townhomes from attached townhomes. And so if there was openness to allowing townhomes in R1, we wanted to propose allowing these in R1. I think here the parking, we'd propose 1 space per unit. And I guess the reason there was just because these are meant to be intentionally smaller units. The idea is that maybe the people living there will have less vehicles. Of course, we can't control that of who's going to live in there, but I think the idea is that this is meant to kind of be more for maybe someone aging in place in their neighborhood, wanting to downsize, an empty nester downsizing, that you might just have less vehicles or a need for parking. And then finally, the detached townhomes or villas. Here again, the kind of, I guess the defining features, they're basically a single family home, but they're just on a narrower lot than what we would currently allow. So a lot of cities where you see these developments are done through a planned unit development kind of process, where they kind of get granted all of those flexibilities from setbacks and minimum lot areas and things. And we don't really have that in Bloomington. We have our planned development overlay, but there's still some limits even on how the flexibility that we can grant. That just kind of creates a challenge. And so the image on top here is actually an example of a detached townhome proposal that someone has for Bloomington, but we ultimately kind of made a determination that it doesn't meet our current single-family standards, because you need the 7,800 square foot lot. It has to be oriented towards the street, those kinds of things. So it's meant to kind of create a more flexible development here. I think the key thing, again, we would propose to allow these in R1. Again, kind of following site area, all those things are kind of regulated by the zoning district, so there isn't really a ton of changes there. Parking on this one, we did say 2 spaces per unit and at least one of them enclosed. I guess the reason why we said enclosed on this one and not other ones is I think kind of the market for these when they're going to be proposed typically have a garage. Like most attached townhome proposals like have some kind of garage just in their design. It seems to be kind of more standard on what they are, but certainly open to that if you would like to see something else there. But that was just kind of staff's rationale for that. And again, this would go through final site and building plan approval, or if it needed flexibility, would go to the Planning Commission and City Council. So I think with that, I want to just pause if there's any comments or questions. I know it was a lot of information, and then I have some guided questions here as well. So thanks.
Any questions for staff? Commissioner Munster.
I do have one question on, so you said that the sort of the logic on coming up with some of the unit counts and the minimum size lots went to the 12 units per acre sort of standard of the underlying plan. Was there any consideration given to essentially treating the 3-plex, the 4-plex, and the multiplex all the same and just applying the 12 units per acre standard, and however many units fit on the lot with all of our other requirements, then that's what you get?
Yeah, Chair Cookton, Commissioner Munster. Yeah, we did think about that. I think, I guess why I used the example of the triplex was just to, assuming that's kind of like the smallest product that would be built, and then what's that like kind of maximum number I guess you can get was where we landed on the 17,500. But I guess, that is I guess I don't know like if that's certainly an option too, where we don't necessarily have to have that standard because there are going to be so many things that already kind of control that in what you're going to get. So I don't think I'm really answering your question, but I guess we're certainly open to just, treating it all the same. And then, the density threshold is just going to kind of limit what you get there. Certainly is possible, or that's the option too.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Cookton. And I can add a little bit more to that. And, at previous study sessions, we've gone through a couple study sessions here with the Planning Commission and Council. And at one of them where we were doing some of this level setting, there was a clear distinction in terms of the direction we initially received, that 2 units on a R1 lot felt comfortable. It was a product or that Bloomington was used to, and that felt confidently worked in a single-family neighborhood environment. And so that's kind of what's informing some of the use allowances in terms of some of these other districts, is there's a point of demarcation from 2 to 3 units. Staff took that direction, although as Dakota presented again, the challenge with that is that any project that's seeking a triplex or above then is going to have to go through a rezoning process, which for smaller projects is a significant barrier to moving forward. So that's probably what informs some of that. I mean, our job is to make sure that the zoning allowances are compliant with the comp plan. And so that's what Dakota is presenting to you here. We definitely have some more openness to allowing some of these other use types in the R1 if you want to see this housing product, this housing type built in Bloomington. And that's getting to the point around barriers. But it's an interesting question. I think what it's tied to is, what is the scale? What is the massing? What is kind of how does that level of density or mass feel in a low density environment? And you're going to get different answers from different people on that. That's for sure.
Okay, Commissioner Munster.
Just as a follow up to that, and I don't want to drag R1 into the mix because I sort of looked at the history, and that's a whole different thing. But in terms of what's allowed in the R3 versus what's allowed in the R3 and the R4 versus what's allowed in the R4 versus the RM12, to just say, okay, 12 units per acre. And I certainly appreciate that there's not much land that we're talking about that any of this applies to. But it's just, as a question, that if you happen to have an R4 lot that under 12 units an acre would fit 6, or I guess that's a bad example because you could do that. But, or an R3 lot, let's say, that would happen to provide you the density to fit 6 units. Is there necessarily a difference between limiting it to 3 and letting it be 6 if that's what the plan allows?
Sure. Yep.
And I guess the way I'd respond to that is I think the value in creating these different use types is then you can apply different performance standards to them. So if, a 3-unit multiplex, it would just be a triplex, but, a 5-unit multiplex versus a quad or a triplex, the characteristics are fairly similar. But a 18-unit multiplex, obviously the characteristics are quite a bit different. And so that's kind of the challenge there, is where do you draw these lines and what is the scale of the impact?
Any other questions for staff before we get to the guided questions? Commissioner Issa.
Thank you, Chair. I might have to do with the guided questions, but since we're here, what do you think if the Parking Over People Act were to pass, how do you think that would affect the front-loaded versus alley-loaded dilemma? Or not dilemma, but
Sure. Yeah. Chair Cookton, Commissioner Issei. Yeah, I guess so that People Over Parking Act was one that was kind of introduced in the legislature this last session. And really what it says is if it would pass, or like that, I guess the iteration that's there would just say that municipalities can't actually impose a minimum parking mandate for any residential, commercial, or industrial property. So if that were to pass with that language, basically then our first guided question here on what the parking standard should be is irrelevant because we can't regulate a parking standard. So it's just kind of more of a market-driven decision that the developer would choose. They don't have to build parking, but maybe they still want to make it marketable to rent out or to lease. But yeah, we just, as a city, wouldn't be able to set a standard. Yep.
Okay, I think we're ready for the guided questions.
All right. So yeah, the first one just relates to parking. So I guess just any feedback or direction on what you think an appropriate parking standard is. And here in this case, I kind of combined triplex, fourplex, multiplex, cottage courts as one, and then detached as another. I would say kind of what's proposed here by staff is kind of that option C, or again, kind of in the middle. So we were kind of going with the 2 spaces per unit, or our current multifamily standard with no garage requirement. So kind of feedback on, do you like that? Do you want it less? Do you want a garage? Any feedback's helpful.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. I'm leaning kind of towards option B, at least for tri-4 multiplexes and cottage courts. I think that having something in the code about not necessarily requiring, but maybe assisting with ease of covered parking, since we get a lot of snow, maybe some sort of less strict setback requirements for essentially carports. I think my sister lives in I would say a hybrid between a cottage court and a detached townhouse development in Boulder, and she has one garage space and then one covered space, and it integrates with the design of the building really nicely, and I think it fits with the character of the neighborhood, but still allows them to own 2 cars. And so I think that anything we can do to help covered parking to ease risk to residents with snow removal and just issues with plowing would be helpful. On the detached townhomes, I think that garages kind of naturally come. But I'd be interested to hear what other commissioners have to say. Thank you.
Commissioner Linay.
Just to build on that, I think I have been paying close attention to townhouses right now because I'm currently looking for one. And I do think that a huge market, when I look at the people who are looking, and this gets to the missing middle, is people who are downsizing, older people, where the likelihood that they're going to have 2 cars is a little bit lower than it is in other people. So I definitely think 1 space per unit as a requirement is sufficient. I think the developers, depending on the price point, 2 is more likely that they're going to choose to build for marketability, but I don't think the requirement needs to be at 2. So I guess I would say I lean towards B also, and for the same reasons that Commissioner Cunningham said. But specifically for detached townhouses, I would say requirement of only 1 spot. Thank you.
I too am liking option B the most. I think option A is just too aggressive for like a fourplex. I don't think we're ready for that, but I'm okay with option B as a minimum, and the market will determine if they want to add more spaces than that or not. But as a requirement, I'm in favor of option B.
Seeing some head nods.
Seeing some head nods. Okay, I think we're good there.
All right.
Oh, Commissioner Cunningham, excuse me.
Apologies for double dipping on this question. I think that having at a certain threshold of size, I think having dedicated guest parking or just additional parking beyond one, like 1.25, might be beneficial for the residents long term. Just a thought. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Commissioner Issa.
Yeah, I might as well throw my, I guess, vote out there as well. Thank you, Chair. I would say option A and letting the market decide.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay. All right. And then, yeah, the second question here is kind of what zoning district should they be permitted? So again, kind of what's here proposed is kind of that option C of just focusing on R3, R4, RM12. So if you kind of what you feel there, and then if you think should certain types be permitted in R1 or not. And I guess maybe I can, for kind of, I guess for option A there, when I say like limited / unique standards to that housing type, I guess I'm thinking for a fourplex, for example, if it was allowed in R1, it would have like that 20-foot setback that's proposed versus like a single family home right now has a 30-foot setback. So I guess that's kind of what option A is getting at. Option B would be if you are okay with it in R1, but as long as it follows the setbacks and kind of the standards of the single family home, that's kind of what that's getting at. If there was, maybe just to clarify.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. A point of order question. Does R1 encompass the RS1 zoning district, or is that totally separate? I just want to make sure I'm clear before making any comment.
Yeah, yep, Chair Cookton, Commissioner Cunningham, that is separate. So yeah, there's the RS1 zoning district and then like R1A. Those are not included here. We're just focusing on R1.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Issa.
Yeah, just a question. Thank you, Chair. When you say, I mean, you might have stated this, but just to clarify, what does it mean specifically, or what do you mean specifically with standards that match, like, for example, option B, basically?
Yep, yeah. So Chair Cookton, Commissioner Issei, probably some of those key standards I'm thinking are like setbacks and height are probably the key ones. So we kind of propose like a 20-foot setback from the street. So that would kind of be option A and R1. Option B is saying the setback has to follow the standard for the single family home. So in this case, it's a 30-foot setback for a single family home from the street. So that's kind of like the main difference there. And then the height, for example, like R1, currently it's 2 stories or 40 feet. So that would kind of be option B. And then option A would be you're okay with them in R1, but then you're also okay if it's like 3 stories or 50 feet, kind of is I would say are the two probably big differences there. Basically, are you okay with a shallower setback and a taller structure in R1, or do you want them to meet the bulk and setback standards of a single family home in R1? It's kind of, if that's helpful.
Commissioner Issa.
Okay, so it would, these, like if it were to be allowed, like triplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts, it would be in unison in terms of setbacks with the existing R1, right, single family zoning.
Yep. Yep.
Wouldn't that kind of like defeat the purpose of like, I guess the purpose of middle, structurally it's still missing middle housing, but like in terms of, I guess, the looks of it, but that's a question, I guess. Maybe it's just something to think about, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess just Chair Cookton, Commissioner, you say, yeah, I think a lot of this is kind of relative to how people feel, or when you look at something, I think, yeah, it's just a matter of opinion. I guess when I see for this example, like, do I think that 2-story triplex is all that different than a single family home? I don't, but that's not how everyone feels. So I think that's kind of where some of that is coming from in like R1. Like if you're okay with it in R1, do you want it to kind of be at the same like setbacks and things of a single family home, or are you okay with them being a little bit closer to the street, potentially a little bit taller than the single family home? So I think it's kind of relative.
Commissioner Linay.
Thank you, Chair. This is a technical question. Just to back up to basic, same understanding. So in this model, are we talking triplexes, fourplexes, 3 different owners, not one owner renting out all 3 units? That's question 1. If the answer is yes, it's 3 separately deeded properties, then would be supportive of option A or B. If it is one property owned and then rented out, then I would say I would advocate for easing into this a little. I think it's going to be a tough sell in certain neighborhoods, and I think that I'd be more cautious if it was specifically predominantly landlord-based. I say this, having lived in Chicago for a long time, those are 2 very, very different ways of, and both exist in large numbers in the city, and they offer a very different flavor for the neighborhood if you have owner-occupied for each unit versus rental properties. Yeah. Predominantly rent. Obviously, you can't completely control. Someone could buy all 3. I get that, but.
Yeah, Chair Cookton, Commissioner Linay. Yeah, I would say for any of these types, I do think there's a possibility where they could be all owner-occupied or rented. I guess just for a triplex, for an example, I don't know, maybe in Bloomington, but there's probably a case where you can kind of essentially like a condo kind of style subdivision of a triplex, or it could be the case where maybe someone buys the triplex and lives in one of the units and then rents out 2 of the units. Kind of same for fourplexes. Cottage courts, I think there's examples of both where they've either been similar to a townhouse where each cottage is on its own individual lot and owner occupied, and then there's some kind of HOA or something that's kind of taking care of that common space or the courtyard. And then detached townhomes, I think, is kind of similar to that, where they could be on individual lots where they are owner occupied, but they could also all be rentals. So I think there's options for both, and it's a little hard for us to kind of regulate some of that or know what exactly is going to come from those types. Yeah. It was a good question. Yeah.
Mr. Kastenday, am I right that attached townhomes are not allowed in R1 today? Is that correct?
Chair Cookton, that is correct. I believe they are R3 and R4.
Is that part of this to open that up to regular townhouses to be available in R1?
Chair Cookton, that is correct. I think that was part of the consideration. I guess Planning Manager Johnson, did we...
Or attached?
No.
Okay.
That is not.
Chair, sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson. Yeah.
Chair Cookton, yeah. So no, that's not currently being considered as part of this. In effect, a triplex or a quad, depending on its configuration or arrangement, is similar to an attached townhome, certainly. But no, that was not one of the missing middle types because the city already has standards for townhomes. It wasn't a missing middle type that we explored, I believe, extensively at our previous study sessions. People were interested in detached townhomes or villa homes because that is becoming an increasingly popular or product type of interest, particularly for older residents, I would say.
Yeah, so I guess it's not in this proposal now, but I guess if the direction was that we would allow detached townhouses or cottage courts in R1, I think, and folks were comfortable, we can certainly, I would say, put attached townhouses into R1 as part of the project. But it's not a part of this scope right now. It's just trying to focus on the new types that we were establishing to
I think
set
that's
some limits. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. That's kind of where I'm at. If we're going to allow detached in R1, I don't know why we wouldn't allow attached in R1. I guess they're a little different, but not for me. I think it's the same. In general, I'm in favor of option A here, but just taking a step back a little bit, and it's not the specific question being asked to us, but the cottage courts, I'll be honest, I don't know if Bloomington is ready for cottage courts. That to me is distinctly different than a detached townhome. I think for me, when the house is facing the street, there's a little bit more of a, how do I say it? But I think you're more convinced to keep your property a little nicer when everybody's looking at it. But when it's kind of tucked in there, I don't know, less eyes on the house, less eyes on, I don't know. I just personally, I would take cottage courts out of this whole thing. And I'm really aggressive on densifying housing and everything. But for me, I've never quite gotten there with cottage courts. So I'm in favor of option A, but for me, I would strike cottage courts completely. I know we're trying to do missing middle. I'm in favor of all the missing middle stuff, but cottage courts, I'm not there yet. Commissioner Risa.
Yeah, I would agree with option A, but I would disagree, and I would want to see cottage courts. Yeah, went that far. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Cunningham.
I think option B is maybe a better approach, in my opinion. Clearly, just purely because of the, I don't even know how to describe it, the overall aesthetic of a neighborhood to match the set. Like, I'm fine with it being an R1. I live in R1. I'm fine. I'd be happy to have this. I have a duplex going up right down the street from my house. Pretty excited. It's a really beautiful building. But I think keeping with the massing and look and character of a neighborhood is important as we densify, to not have kind of a hodgepodge of different building types, setbacks, heights, overall square footages, things along those lines. So for that reason, I'm in favor of option B, but interested to hear everyone else's opinion.
Commissioner Summers.
I think that, thank you, Chair. For the most part, I agree with Commissioner Cunningham. I think another aspect of option B that I'm thinking about is, I don't know if we know the answer to this, is do we think that a lot of contractors might seek to adjust or amend what their specific building type, like would we consistently have proposals in front of us pushing us towards option A because contractors and builders were saying that the standards of single-family homes don't match the buildings that they're trying to build? Because I think if we are going towards option B and thinking we might be creating a lot of extra work, is that ideal, or is it enough of a deterrent because it's annoying to do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe.
Kastenday.
Yeah, Chair Cookton, Commissioner Summers. I guess, yeah, one thought that comes to mind on that. I think it's a good, important thing to think about. If that were the case, I think when they meet with staff, we would certainly first encourage them to try to make that standard work so they wouldn't need flexibility. But then I guess they could try to do a PD overlay and get flexibility. Another option is maybe, depending on the site and its location, maybe that is a candidate to rezone to R3. I know we just talked about don't want to necessarily have them go through a more discretionary process, but that could be another way of maybe, if it doesn't quite work in R1, maybe there is a way to kind of rezone it R3. That's something we can talk with applicants and kind of help them weigh out those options to see what makes sense for them. But yeah, we'd certainly first want to just encourage them to meet the standard and make it work.
Commissioner Cunningham.
I work for a developer and have 10 years experience as a commercial general contractor. Definitely in that case, you'd work with the city. But if there's a way to increase density to lower your per unit cost, a private developer would do that to drive more revenue. And so that's why I'm more cautious about option A, because I would max out the lot if I could. Sorry, colleagues in the industry that are watching this from home.
Any other thoughts on question number 2? Commissioner White.
I think there's a number of challenges with this idea of allowing it in R1 and the size of the lot and height. I think with triplexes and fourplexes, it's a little easier to blend It's a little easier to go with option B. I think it makes more sense to go with option B because they fit into the lots a little bit better. I know we're also talking right now about a fairly low number of spots in the city, but if it is a permitted use in R1, that opens up the potential for, as homes age out and are replaced, for this to become a more common way to, once a house is ready to go, replace it with something that has more density. The cottage courts and the detached townhomes, those are just so different in character from a single family home, that I think you almost have to go with an option A in those cases in order to make them work. So I guess I'm a little bit like option B for triplexes and fourplexes and option A for cottage courts and detached townhomes. I agree. I'm not sure that Bloomington's there on the cottage courts, but I'm open to somebody convincing me they've got a good plan for it. So, I don't want to close the door on that. So that's my thoughts.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Sorry, I have Commissioner White, clarifying question. Are you saying that you're fine with all of these uses being in R1?
I think so. I have to look at the maps again to be absolutely sure, but I think in concept, I'm okay with it. I do have some concerns about, a big detached townhome development being into a neighborhood, but again, is there space for it? I think that's that's ultimately what it's going to come down to. I don't know. There is certainly always that fear of our developers going to start buying up perfectly good single-family houses and tearing them down to put in, cottage courts or detached townhomes because they can make more money off of them. I do have those concerns, but I also, we need more density and we need more housing, and we need more affordable housing. So maybe that's not an entirely bad thing.
Thank you. With that said, I'm worried about. I like the idea of cottage courts. I realize that I don't know. I've seen them in a lot of planning articles over the years. I haven't seen a lot of them built, but I like the idea. And you see a lot of townhome developments going into areas, with kind of targeted density. I worry about having them be a permitted use in R1. Conditional, totally fine with, but permitted being a concern where, you could just replat 2 lots and then you have enough space to build it without the rezoning effort. Just wonder if the rezone check and balance would be something that the city would want to hold on to, knowing that missing middle is a critical issue for the city. We need more housing. So, thank you.
Yeah, I think, if there's one thing I've learned in my 5 years on this commission is that we get the most public testimony when something is right next to somebody's house. We can put up an apartment tower as tall as we want and nobody cares. But if you put something next to somebody's home, that's when they really get interested. And that's my concern with the cottage courts as a concept. I think it's great. But man, I just think if you put this in an R1 zone next to somebody's house, I think the public testimony could be explosive. If we got like 8 houses next to somebody's single family home, I think we could have a riot in here. And I am worried about allowing that in R1. I could get there in R3 or R4, but I worry about cottage courts in R1. Any other thoughts? Commissioner Munster.
Okay, I'm going to be a little bit complicated, I think. So, just again, sort of looking at the history of this whole discussion, there doesn't really seem to be the appetite to bring triplexes and fourplexes into R1. So, I think I'm on option C. And I also share the chairman's concern about cottage courts. I have seen those developed, not recently, they're older ones, and they do sort of become sort of this insular situation that isn't the best for a neighborhood. However, I would go with option A on detached townhomes. So that's just my thoughts.
I think that's fair. Any other thoughts? Commissioner Issa?
Just to ask, I guess, fellow commissioners and chair. Thank you, chair. What issues do you guys think the cottage courts would bring? Is it just like more traffic, more noise, more like institutional investors coming in and like buying up lots, kind of like maybe what you alluded to?
Sure. For me, I think it's a little bit of potential nuisance characteristics, whether it be just upkeep of the yard or, like a gathering of people that they're kind of tucked in there. And so the public isn't able to kind of be with them, and just sort of the self-policingness of a neighborhood where you're right next to somebody's house when it's kind of tucked back there. There are multiple things back there that you can't quite see or that you don't have great eyes on. I think there's just a lessening of personal safety with that is just my experience, but it's just my own thought on it. And I think that's part of it for me. And again, I think I could get there with the cottage court in R3 or R4. R1 is what concerns me. But then I think about, well, R3 or R4, I'd rather just have an apartment building. I mean, it's way more dense to have an apartment building. So I'd rather just have multifamily housing than a cottage court if we're going to R3 or R4. Commissioner Munster?
And if I just may follow up
Please.
on your question, what I've seen is exactly what the chairman said, that sort of from a maintenance perspective, when it's everybody's job, it's nobody's job. So things just don't get done, things don't get kept up. And also, depending on the design of it, you end up with a huge problem with eyes on the street. That if you have a building in the front and then sort of things around the back, you have this sort of internal courtyard that people don't necessarily feel safe in. But right, I mean, if you're looking for density, just put up apartments. You're not really going to get any additional benefit with the cottage court versus just building an apartment.
Oh, interesting. Thank you both for that insight.
Any other thoughts on question 2? Commissioner Summers?
I think one of the things with should certain types be permitted in R1 or not that I'm thinking about is, are there a lot of parcels that could be purchased on their own and turned into a triplex? So I'm thinking about the house next door to mine is purchased and is turned into a triplex. Is that something that could happen? I feel like it's different if someone has to buy multiple parcels because that's kind of a waiting game for an investor, but that there would potentially be significant impact to neighborhoods, and neighbors would come here to talk about it if they were like, there's a fourplex moving in next door and it feels close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chair Cookton, Commissioner Summers. Yeah, I can definitely kind of dig into that a little bit and have that if at a next study session or public hearing. I would just say in general, like kind of what's going to come into play. So say for an interior lot, we currently have 7,800 square feet as the minimum lot size. If you'd allow this in R1, in theory, if you had a 7,800 square foot lot, you could put a triplex, but then the caveat is it's still got to meet the setbacks and the impervious surface coverage, and then you have that 12 units an acre kind of calculation. And so I think it has to be more than 7,800 square feet to get that. I don't know the math off the top of my head, but to do like the quick, so like 3,000, like 600 something per unit, I think, at that like 12 units an acre. So in theory, you'd have to have at least probably a 10,000 or more square foot lot. But that could potentially be possible if they could meet setbacks and the impervious surface too. So it's a lot of math and like kind of weighing out the different standards. Yeah.
Anything to add, Mr. Johnson?
No, I think he hit it.
Very good. Commissioner Issa?
Yeah, just a question. Thank you, Chair. So for like cottage courts, I know you brought up the potential for things to be hidden and like certain standards not to be. My question basically is, would the city would still apply the same standards in terms of like aesthetics, for lack of a better term, but like bushes, things like that, make sure everything is nice and cute.
Yeah, Chair Cookton, Commissioner Issa, yeah, we would propose that that these follow our landscaping requirements, like townhomes and other multifamily properties. There'd be lighting standards. For parking, yeah, it's got to be curbed and things. I think where the uniqueness of the cottage court then is some of those additional standards that it wasn't in this packet because there's just already so much here. But one of the things we were kind of thinking about is like that the court itself like kind of has to like face the street, or there has to be an opening from the street to see into the courtyard, and then all of the houses do have to like front the courtyard in some way. And again, it's kind of a balance of some of those things serve a good purpose to do that, but then does it kind of limit what someone might be able to do on the lot, and kind of weighing those things. So there would definitely be standards, I guess, just in general, that it still has to meet all of our standards now, and then there would be additional standards kind of around the courtyard, just because it is kind of unique to other housing types.
Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. That makes so much sense. Thank you for the explanation. I guess, fellow commissioners and chair, one thing, just I guess to wrap up this discussion, because I'm curious, right? This would increase housing or density, right? The cottage courts, for example, and if there's checks and balances for standards to be, as is, you're right. So again, objectively, it'd be more housing, but potentially there could be issues with people not following that standards, or developers or whatnot, right? Wouldn't me personally, my opinion is like the housing, having more housing outweighs the potential for something that could happen. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I think for me, I like detached townhomes. It, to me, doesn't seem that much different, except they face the street, which to me addresses the nuisance and complaints, or I'd rather just have apartments. So that's kind of where I'm at. But Commissioner Cunningham?
Thank you, Chair. I tend to agree with Commissioner Cookton. I feel like facing the street, and depending on the lot size, kind of might drive you in more density with townhomes or slightly larger buildings. I am cognizant of what Commissioner Linné said a half hour ago about smaller single-story homes that allow residents to age in place in their neighborhood. I think that's something that should be considered. Doing some quick napkin math, and at the risk of derailing our conversation, if you were to buy 2 single-family homes off market and replat the lot to be a single one to put an 8-unit cottage core development on, at average price for the city of Bloomington, your land basis per unit is going to be almost $100,000. So the economics of that in the market right now are pretty tough. Or these cottage courts will be very expensive, because that's just the land before you tear down the buildings or build anything back up, let alone everything else that goes into it. So just something to be cognizant of, that these are difficult developments to do. We're not going to see, well, I don't know, but I would assume we're not going to see 50 of them next year if this ordinance is adopted. Thank you.
Yeah, that is a whole nother conversation. I think we should curtail it. No, we've had that conversation before about how much impact is this really going to have, and is it worth the staff time? But I don't want to rehash that one tonight. Any other questions specific to item number 2, or should we move on to number 3 here? Let's go to number 3.
Okay, great. I think these next 2 are hopefully a little less complicated. I apologize. So the next one, my screen's not advancing, but it was related to the site area. So we kind of proposed the reduction from 20,000 square feet to 17,500 for R3. So it was more, I guess, just kind of maybe more of a yes or no of like, are you okay if the direction we went is to reduce some of the lot sizes on some of those missing middle zoning districts or not? Or if, yeah.
Mr. Kastenday, we've done so much of this, it gets a little fuzzy in my head. But have we reduced the minimum lot requirement in R3 and R4 before, or has it only been in R1?
Chair Cookton and Planning Commission, I believe, at least the last few years, it's really just been R1. I think the 20,000 in R3 and R4, and then is it 40,000 for RM12? I think have been pretty standard for a while, so we haven't chipped away at it like we have R1.
Mr. Johnson?
Chair Cookton, that's correct. The site area reductions have only been applied to, there we go, the R1 zoning district and the minimum area for two-family dwellings within R1. So those are the only site area and lot width reductions that have been completed thus far.
Thank you for that. I wanted to just make sure we weren't whittling down every time we just take a couple more 1,000 square feet away. It doesn't sound like that's the case. What's been proposed to me, I think, is prudent, and I'm fine with it. Commissioner Cunningham?
Thank you, Chair. I'm fine with it.
Okay. Anybody else? Commissioner White? Very good. Seeing some other thumbs up. Anybody else with comments?
If I can provide one more piece of context,
Please.
A lot of this is just about creating more candidate lots. And we certainly can provide GIS analysis around our site areas and our kind of R1 zone lots and our low density areas, but we're just, this was a theme of our 2022 zoning reform as we were trying to create more candidate lots.
Commissioner Muster?
Let's go back. Okay, just a question on the proposed standard for R4. That is based on the 12 units per acre at 4 units, right?
Yes, I believe so. That was the math I did. Yeah, because that would be like the lowest unit you could build. So I think, yeah, that's, again, yeah, kind of building a fourplex on a 33,000 square foot lot gets you like right at that like 12 units an acre threshold.
Okay.
Yep.
My question was sort of in the nature of, can we make it less?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I think I was, yeah, trying to do all that math to kind of just get to the point of like, what is the minimum you could have? And I think for thinking about that 12 units an acre, that was kind of where I got to, is like that smallest number.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on question 3? All right. We'll go to the next one.
Okay, final one, and thanks for sticking with it for 3 study sessions. And so this final one I just had in a similar vein, just related to the setbacks. Again, we were kind of proposing 20 feet from the street, 25-foot rear setback, and then 10-foot side. If you're kind of okay with reducing the setbacks, again, I guess just in that nature of creating more candidate lots. If you want it to be something else, you don't want to change the setbacks, any thoughts you have is great.
Mr. Kastenday, the proposed standard for these, is that matching multifamily housing?
No, yeah, Chair Cookton, Planning Commission, it's not. I think where we landed on the 20 feet has kind of been on some recent townhome developments that have gotten flexibility, have asked for a 20-foot setback. So I think that's just where we went down to 20. Yeah.
Mr. Johnson?
Chair Cookton and members, I'm going to make one comment broader about all residential districts and then kind of tying it to public safety too, or fire prevention, is that all of our multifamily districts right now currently include a 40-foot front yard setback. So it's a pretty significant setback. And what effectively that does is often push the building further back into the site in order to achieve the number of density to make the project pencil, as Commissioner Cunningham referenced, actually towards neighbors in effect. And so I think it's been a very common point of developers seeking flexibility as to that front yard setback overall. I mean, I know we're focused on missing middle housing tonight, and that's where the focus needs to be for this project, but staff would not shy away from just a broader analysis and evaluation of all of our structure setbacks, particularly in our residential districts, but kind of across districts. So maybe, maybe not next year's work plan, but a future work plan. That work does need to be done. And in effect, our fire department actually prefers the building closer to the street if there is not a fire lane or some access lane that gives them closer access to the building. So just a couple things to think about.
Setback thoughts? Commissioner Issa?
Yeah, in that case, I'd definitely be supportive of the reduced setbacks as proposed.
Commissioner White?
I'm supportive in concept. I don't know if 20 is the right number. I trust the staff. My concern in thinking about 20 feet from the street is by the time you have some right-of-way and some sidewalk, it doesn't leave much in the way of green space in front of a building or whatever they want to put in front of a building. So I'm a little concerned we end up with just a lot more impervious surface. That would be my only concern is if we're losing some filtration there.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Quick question, kind of piggybacking off Commissioner White's comment. These setbacks are not linked in any way to the impervious surface calculations for a lot in this zoning district, right? They still have to meet, was it 70%? I can't remember what it, or maximum is 70% coverage with impervious?
Yeah, Chair Cookton, Commissioner Cunningham. Yeah, they would still have to meet or be under the maximum impervious limit. I think in R3 it's 70%, and then R4 and RM12 is 80%. So,
got it.
Yeah, so they would still, even with that setback, still have to be under that impervious threshold. Yep.
Got it. With that being said, I echo your concern about where the impervious surface is and like where the pretty landscaping is, but it at least puts my mind a little bit at ease. I could get on board with this proposed standard.
I think for me, yeah, R3, R4, RM12, those are starting to become more urban zones and whatever. They're at busy intersections, whatever. So I'm okay being more aggressive with the reduction in setbacks. So I think I'm okay with this. It's always kind of hard to just look at a page of numbers and know if you're making the right thing. But I think, at least in concept, I'm okay with this. Commissioner Munster?
I was debating whether I was going to say anything. Thank you. So just as a question, these setbacks would only apply to the 3-plex, 4-plex, et cetera, that we're talking about, not the zoning district generally.
No, Chair Cookton, Commissioner Munster, this would apply to the district overall. So yeah, the way that our setbacks are currently regulated in our code are based on the zoning district. So for the R3, just as an example, yeah, if someone was putting a triplex or a cottage court, or if they were building a multifamily building, it would be the same setback for that zoning district. Yep.
Or a single, just for the sake of argument.
Yeah, yep, or a single family home. Yep.
Yes,
Good
I guess
clarification.
that brings up a bit of a question for me then, because Mr. Johnson, is it R3 is the new one?
R3 is the most recently created district, been applied to one site. It was created in 2015.
So we've never even developed something on an R3, and so we're taking a decision that was made just like a couple of years ago, and we're already changing it. It seems a little off to me.
Chair Cookton, that's not an unwise or unfair observation. I would say, I think generally speaking, the higher the setbacks are, and to Commissioner White's point, we're starting to see some of the impacts of some of those setbacks that it also typically involves or results in increased driveway. Pushing the structures back further away from the street can lead to more impervious surface in some ways. But yeah, I think it gets to the point that you're making around changing character too. The Bloomington was effectively developed mostly with 30 to 40 foot setbacks. And if you're trying to create more infill development and increase density, utilize the public infrastructure that is there, then you do need to make more, create more flexibility in terms of the use of the lot overall. Yeah.
This is probably a phone a friend for Mr. Markegard, but what year was R3 created?
2015.
15. Okay, so I guess that's 10 years ago. Even in the last 10 years, I think this missing middle housing thing is thought of much differently even than 10 years ago. So that makes me feel better that we're being more aggressive than even 10 years ago. I think there has been a change in mindset in the last 10 years is this type of housing. So I can get there. Commissioner Issa.
And for R3, was it the Penn Lake one? That's okay. Thank you. Sure.
Anybody else for guiding question number 4? Okay.
All right. Yeah, that's all I have. I guess next steps, we're going to be doing some study sessions with the HRA board as well as the council in September. And then I think kind of based on feedback from all the bodies, we'll kind of continue to work at it. And if directed, we'll bring you an ordinance maybe this year or early next year. So, but if you have any other comments or questions, just let me know.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kastenday. And if the public wants to continue monitoring this, it will go before the City Council as a study item on September 29th. We will move to our next study item, item number 4, which is our annual review of rules of procedure. Planning Manager, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Cookton. Part 2, if I may. Just a quick summary of what brought us here. Again, we completed the initial review of our rules. It's required in August of every year. We did so on August the 14th. Staff presented 6 recommended changes to you that where we felt the rules were silent or could improve from some additional clarification. The majority of those changes were supported. 2 additional changes were requested. And this evening we're presenting those revised rules, trying to be attentive to the direction that you provided us at your last meeting. So the 2 additional changes that you were requested were clarifying the public hearing procedures around the allowance for the chair to establish a time limit. If you recall, in our initial draft, we proposed 3-minute time limit. The body felt that not having a precise number would be a better approach. So we did revise that language to reflect that. In addition, Commissioner Linné suggested that additional attempts at providing testimony, some wording, which we agreed was an improvement, be authorized by the chair as opposed to invited, I believe was the previous language. So this is the revised language before you on the screen. I certainly can read it if that's preferred or desired, but just in summary, we feel like this is kind of meeting the Planning Commission's request of having the ability to establish a time limit before the public hearings. The second question, I can take questions at the end if there are any. The second change was just a observation that Robert's Rules of Order does allow for the suspension of rules by a 2/3 supermajority vote as opposed to a unanimous vote. And so we did look into that and concur that does reflect Robert's Rules. So I would propose to make that change as well. This doesn't come up very often, I should suggest, or by the way. The only time I observe it at City Council is, again, they have a 9 p.m. Time limit, and so when they have to suspend their rules, it's extending their time past 10 o'clock, which has happened a couple times recently. Forgive me, I didn't mean to advance. Is there any questions about kind of those 2 additional changes? And if not, I can present a motion for your consideration.
Questions for staff? Seeing none.
Okay. Thank you for that, and here's a suggested motion, and just to reiterate that the City Council, the City Code requires the Council to adopt the revised rules, so if you took action this evening, we do have the ability to schedule this item on the September 8th consent agenda at City Council. So just wanted to clarify that.
Any further comments, or I'd entertain a motion? Commissioner Cunningham.
I move, are we entertaining a motion? Yeah.
I certainly am.
I move to adopt the Planning Commission rules of procedure as presented at the August 28th regular meeting.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the Planning Commission rules of procedure as presented. Any further comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes 7-0. And as stated by Mr. Johnson, this will go before the City Council on September 8th on their consent agenda. Thank you very much. We'll move then to item number 5, which is the consideration of draft Planning Commission meeting minutes from August 7th and August 14th of 2025. We will take those as 2 separate motions and begin with August 7th. Is there any discussion or a motion for the approval of the minutes from August 7th? Commissioner White.
I move to approve the Planning Commission meeting synopsis from August 7th, 2025 as presented.
We have a motion and a second for approval of August 7th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes 7-0. August 14. Commissioner White.
I move to approve Planning Commission meeting synopsis from August 14th, 2025 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
I will call for a vote of approval and then denial and then abstination, as one of our commissioners, Commissioner Munster, was abstaining from that meeting, or was absent rather. All those in favor of August 14th say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain.
Abstain.
That motion passes 6-0 with 1 abstination. We will then move to item number 6, which is the Planning Commission policy and issue update. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cookton. The next meeting before you on your calendar is September the 4th. We have no items. We've officially canceled that meeting next week. The 2 following meetings that are on September the 18th and October 9th. On September the 18th, we have 2 public hearings scheduled. The first is final site and building plans for the City Fleet Maintenance Facility at 1800 West 96th Street, just north of Civic Plaza here. That's a roughly 40,000 square foot building. It's part of the city's capital improvement plan. The second public hearing is an amendment to the Normandale Lake District Plan. There previously was a study item about specifically the pedestrian bridge that the plan calls for at 84th Street in Normandale. So some amendments there. And then a study item is reviewing the draft components of the 2025 miscellaneous issues ordinance. For October 9th, we have two study items currently scheduled. One is the official height limits map, which Dakota referenced as part of his presentation tonight. And then the second is our transportation and engineering staff will be before us to present the annual pavement management program and capital improvement plan update. So this is giving you a snapshot as to all the different street projects that are under consideration, trails, other things related to that plan for next year. I would note that the October 9th development application deadline has not yet passed, so there could be development applications still tracking to that one. So that's my only updates.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I have a question for you. When was the last time we updated the Normandale Lake District Plan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cookton. The Normandale Lake District Plan was updated in 2017, and that update was a more significant update, and it related to the opening of the westbound 494 access from East Bush Lake Road. And so the reason that we completed that update is that the intersection of 84th and Normandale, which also connects to the pedestrian bridge component, was significantly larger sized as dictated by the traffic volumes coming out of Normandale Lake office park development as a result of that. So that westbound ramp effectively diverted a significant amount of traffic up East Bush Lake Road as opposed to tracking to Normandale. So there was a couple other miscellaneous components to the update, but it was in 2017.
Great. Thank you. Any other items planning commissioners would like to bring up this evening? Seeing none, that will conclude this August 28th meeting of the Bloomington Planning Commission. Good night.